Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting. I will call the meeting to order. Is the clerk ready?
Yes.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Here.
Mr. Sachs,
Here.
Ms. Hersey,
Here.
Mr. Brown,
Here.
Mr. Roberts,
Here.
Mr. Colebrook,
Here.
Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
First is the approval of the minutes from the previous meetings. The first one is February 1st, 2021. And we have a second one as well. Do we have to do those separate or can we do those combined?
You can do them combined.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I'll
I'm
move
to
approval.
approve.
I'll
Mary Alice moved. I think Sharice seconded. Is that
I'll
correct?
second it. Okay, I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion, any corrections? Seeing none, clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes. Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Sachs,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. Next up on the agenda is additions to the agenda. Is there anybody that has additions to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to public input and presentations. Is there any presentations? Eric Sachs.
So I have something about the PUD that's coming up. Is it better to do this here or wait till the PUD discussion?
Makes me no difference. Is it best to do it here?
Can I suggest that we do it during the PUD discussion, just to have consistency?
Okay.
That's fine by me.
Then we will go on to public input. And before we start, I'd like to read just a short little passage here. The city takes public comment via email, written format, and verbally. On October 12th, 2020, the Urbana City Council approved new rules for public input during remote electronic meetings. These rules are listed on each agenda for city-sponsored public meetings. Members of the public may join meetings as either a Zoom webinar or telephone participant to make verbal input. This is a time for committee members to listen to the public. Discussion, debate, or commentary will not take place during this period. We ask that you address your comments to the public body as a whole and maintain respect for the process and respect for members of the council, city staff, and the general public. Thank you for helping us conduct respectful and productive meetings. If you wish to speak during public input, please raise your hand and wait to be called on by the presiding officer. Please state your first and last name for the meeting record. So first up, looks like Evelyn B. Underwood.
Reverend Dr. Evelyn Burnett Underwood here.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Yes. I really, God knows, I did not have my hand up. I thought it was lowered. But since I got this opportunity for the microphone after being muted, having all kind of problems, I just have to say something. I just want to say that I praise God for being able to get on tonight. I praise God that I'm going to finally get my surgery. And I might be gone for a little while, maybe not. I'm going down to Barnes Jewish Hospital, and I will be getting back surgery. Hopefully I'll be a lot better, and I can participate better, and I can feel my, what, Bishop? Help me.
Yeah, your responsibility as a citizen.
Oh, okay. Did you hear, Bishop? I'm gonna, okay, I'm happy. So thank you for calling on me, and I will be listening in during the meeting. Thank you.
And we hope you a speedy recovery as well.
Thank you.
The next up with their hand raised is Liz.
Hi, this is Liz Cardman of Urbana, and I just wanted to make a comment about the plan unit development coming up before you later this evening. I'll be brief, I promise you, very brief. Historic resources at the Urbana Archives confirm that all 10 structures being demolished were originally built as single-family houses or duplexes. And in their place, the developer is proposing one massive complex. That's 10 for 1. This massive complex blatantly contradicts the spirit of the Lincoln-Busey Corridor Guidelines, which require that any new development be compatible with the fabric of the adjoining R2 neighborhood. Further, it's been granted a footprint that is 50% more than is allowable by right. For such extraordinary exemptions from the corridor guidelines and zoning regulations, an equivalently extraordinary public benefit and emphasis on quality development must be realized. Opposing Alice Campbell Hall, this complex will represent the face of Urbana to the face of the university and its alumni. I ask that you rigorously review this proposal to ensure that all of the DRB's conditions for excellence in design are met to the fullest before moving it forward for approval by the full council. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up is Julie Watkins.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Julie Watkins, and I've lived in Urbana. You've cut my, I need to see my notes. I've lived in Urbana since 1976. I have public input about comments made last week. I wanted to say thank you to Therese Hersey for her comments that Carl needs to do better about vaccination. Homebound doesn't mean others in that home or building aren't going in and out for jobs and may be exposing that person. We shouldn't accept herd immunity by default for poor or crowded. The township vote showed that it's Urbana values to care about everyone, and people making plans that don't include homebound need to take note. Also last week, people made comments about Aaliyah Lewis, and there was no council response that I remember. I am still flummoxed that there have been no apology and that charges have not been dropped. You've made resolutions and all, but now how much trust can we have when there's video of police using excessive, unnecessary force and the victim is still under felony threat? An apology would be nice, but the felony threat is a real problem. Council silence is perplexing. How does this help Urbana values? Now that the primary is over, could you please? Thank you to other commenters, and thank you to the council for considering this.
Thank you. Next up is Haki. Haki, you're muted. Haki, there you go.
Okay, my fault. I didn't even hear you. I'm sorry. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Haki. Recent graduate of the University of Illinois in Community Health, Senior Project Manager of Naturopath Nutrition, co-founder of CC ARC, and a member of Black Students for Revolution. I'm calling because, first, let me say I'd like to give a shout out to my brother, Lamont Peppers for, reaching out regarding the continuation of the racial pod discussions and meeting with me regarding other initiatives for the community. So I thank him for that. I had a nice interaction with officers. I know it's not crazy. I mean, it's crazy to hear nice. Now, just because I say it was a nice interaction does not mean I am still not an abolitionist and believe in transformative justice for the people and for especially vulnerable populations. When I say a nice interaction, the officers were receptive to some of the suggestions that I had. Officers were restraining a brother, I believe Thursday night, and I believe the MTD called 911 because I guess the brother stated or, threatened to punch somebody on the bus. Upon leaving work, I noticed the officers there restraining the brother. And so I did what I always do, approached the scene, phone recording. Now, upon arrival at the scene, the brother was yelling, acting, as you probably would say, erratic. But the brother also stated that he wanted to go to an ambulance. He needed to go to the hospital. He even stated that he wanted to be in a psych ward. So if the brother is saying that he wants to be in a psych ward, he is actively asking for help that is needed. Upon arriving at the scene, I started to talk to the brother. I asked what was his name. I asked, had he eaten? He stated that he had not eaten in 3 days, right? I also asked, where did he live? Did he have a home? He said he has a home. I said, where do you live? And he stated he lives everywhere. And so when I say officers being receptive, I was trying to be there for the brother to ensure his safety and that he can make it and live tomorrow. I felt there are certain other things I felt that I could have done, but again, because of the situations that we have with community and police, I decided to not take it any further. However, the officer, Sergeant McKinney, he was receptive to me speaking to the brother to ensure that he was calm. However, again, there is need for improvement. The best improvement is abolition, but again, there's a work in progress in how we can implement transformative justice. In this area, this was downtown Urbana. Downtown Urbana has multiple organizations that are committed to social justice, including the Cunningham Township, and I'm sure MTD is committed to that, as well as they have received funding from United Way for racial healing and whatnot. I asked the officer, did you give him, you should all carry food, water, snacks, blankets. I think I've said that multiple times on these calls, and he said he's never heard of that suggestion, but he said, it was a great suggestion. Because simple questions like, did you eat today? And he said that he had not eaten in 3 days. It shows you why J. Edgar Hoover said the breakfast program was the dangerous program, because we know what happens when people are hungry. They're hangry, right? And there already is injustice. So let us really think about officers, when we're talking about defunding, officers paying for the snacks, the food, the waters, and supplying that. They also should have pillows. As the brother tried to hit his head against the ground, but one of the officers had to hold his head up, that's a very uncomfortable position. And if he is homeless, he's probably living on the streets. So at least having a pillow in a plastic bag, so for sanitary purposes, that can aid in that. And this can also aid in the creation of the rehabilitation zones where community organizations can designate individuals to respond to these police interactions with homeless individuals.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your time is up. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next up is James TGR Corbin.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, all right. Thank you. James Corbin, Urbana, Illinois, First Followers, Community Outreach Specialist and Navigator. This is just a quick update to some information I was given last time about the how to activate the COVID funds for the landlord. And the landlords cannot activate these funds. It's up to the tenant to do that. Instead, the landlord is looked on as a liaison, or to make sure that the tenant has all paperwork in, as well as verifying anything that the tenant is saying that it's COVID related or they cannot meet bills. So this is causing a real problem. And I think this is already adding more strife to an already overburdened situation and crisis that we're dealing with in the street due to COVID uh, and other issues right now at this time. The landlords are also expected to do the normal landlord duties, maintenance and everything else, with no income or money coming in, as well as meeting their needs and trying to pay taxes on their property. Now, I'm not just speaking for the landlord, but I'm speaking for the tenant and the landlord because these two are intertangled or tied together. And if we don't, if we don't address both issues at this time, we're going to be dealing with a much greater issue in the near future. And if the landlord cannot get to these funds and the tenant is having a hard time gathering information and having a difficult time getting through the line, because if you call that line, 1877 line, they send you to Help Illinois Family Service. Then they'll send you back to RPC, and then it's this constant cycle of back and forth, which is getting frustrating, And so I'm giving this as a warning, just trying to help us out before we see this greater issue in the future of both trying to house a tenant and a landlord soon, and as well as the city not being able to get the taxes needed to run the city. We're gonna have to figure out a way to make this much easier, because this process that's there now is very cumbersome. It's not effective, and they are not receiving the funds. And also, the landlords are still not ready to or wanting to rent out just to go through this process. This is a headache. What are we going to do about it? This community, I care about it. I'm in the street daily, talking one-on-one with individuals as well as landlords, business people alike. And I got my finger on the pulse as well as my team. And I'm giving you this warning that we need to make this less cumbersome. So, and that's all I want to say. I thank you. And that's it.
Thank you. Paul Debovic.
Hi, this is Paul. I say Debevic, but it's not an easy name.
I apologize.
No, not an easy name. So I made some comments at the January 14th Design Review Board meeting concerning the energy and sustainability issues of the proposed planned unit development that you'll have on your agenda in a little bit. And I have to say I'm pleased that the new proposal does respond to a number of the energy and sustainability concerns. You have before you a better building, but it certainly won't win any awards. The roof, the floor, and the walls are now well insulated. The windows, not so much, no change to them, so they could be better. But, I have to go back to the initial question I raised. Why not net zero? A net zero building could be an attractive selling point to individuals concerned about climate change and having a better future. And it would be wonderful to have a net zero building right opposite Alice Campbell Hall. So they did look at geothermal. It's not appropriate for the site. They do have the ability to install solar panels, but why not do it now? The proposal says that they will wait for a state subsidy. But in fact, the state subsidies are really quite minimal. It's a lottery. Urbana lost in these lotteries many times. They'll probably lose in the lottery too. There is already an ample federal tax credit available for solar panels. And many people in the neighborhood have put solar panels on their homes already, not hoping for a state of Illinois subsidy. They say that they will put Energy Star appliances. Well, of course they should. But the air conditioning that they've specified is not impressive at all. It's a SEER rating of 14. There are technologies of heating air conditioning where SEERs of 20 to 30 are possible. So they could do much, much better. And of course, that lowers the utility bill for all of the tenants, lowers energy usage, and it's the right thing to do. They have some electric vehicle charging stations already. That's good to see. And I'll have to say, you know, we want to be a progressive community. There are communities that are building net zero already. There's the Geos neighborhood in Urbana, Colorado. There's Vermont Homes in White River Junction, Vermont. I sent out a message to our neighborhood listserv asking if there are people who want to have their concerns about the PUD brought before you, but don't have the time to send out an email. I got 13 responses. 4 people probably will be sending you a letter. So the neighborhood is concerned about this building. I'm sure you'll hear from many people about the overall design and the fact that it does not follow the DRB board conditions. I think you really ought to send it back to the DRB and not approve it tonight. Thanks very much for your attention, and I'll listen further on to your considerations.
Thank you. Next up is Justin Hendricks.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Justin Michael Hendricks, Champaign-Urbana resident, Parkland College student, community engineer, creator of Hidden Homeboy. Hidden Homeboy, Downward Boys and Girls Club, and myself would like to thank everyone for the contributions, promotions, viewership, and more for our Black History Month Trivia Night. Congratulations to all the winners. Thank you to our sponsors, BC Bank, Rita Connolly, Megan McDonald, Tanya, and Uniting Mag Action Magazine.
Next up on the agenda is additions to the agenda. Is there anybody that has additions to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to public input and presentations. Is there any presentations? Eric Sachs.
So I have something about the PUD that's coming up. Is it better to do this here or wait till the PUD discussion?
Makes me no difference. Is it best to do it here?
Can I suggest that we do it during the PUD discussion, just to have consistency?
Okay.
That's fine by me.
Then we will go on to public input. And before we start, I'd like to read just a short little passage here. The city takes public comment via email, written format, and verbally. On October 12th, 2020, the Urbana City Council approved new rules for public input during remote electronic meetings. These rules are listed on each agenda for city-sponsored public meetings. Members of the public may join meetings as either a Zoom webinar or telephone participant to make verbal input. This is a time for committee members to listen to the public. Discussion, debate, or commentary will not take place during this period. We ask that you address your comments to the public body as a whole and maintain respect for the process and respect for members of the council, city staff, and the general public. Thank you for helping us conduct respectful and productive meetings. If you wish to speak during public input, please raise your hand and wait to be called on by the presiding officer. Please state your first and last name for the meeting record. So first up, looks like Evelyn B. Underwood.
Reverend Dr. Evelyn Burnett Underwood here.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Yes. I really, God knows, I did not have my hand up. I thought it was Lord. But since I got this opportunity for the microphone after being muted, having all kind of problems, I just have to say something. I just want to say that I praise God for being able to get on tonight. I praise God that I'm gonna finally get my surgery, and I might be gone for a little while, maybe not. I'm going down to Barnes Jewish Hospital, and I will be getting back surgery. Hopefully I'll be a lot better, and I can participate better, and I can feel my, what, Bishop? Help me.
Yeah, your responsibility as a citizen.
Oh, okay. Did you hear, Bishop? I'm gonna, okay, I'm happy. So thank you for calling on me, and I will be listening in during the meeting. Thank you.
And we hope you a speedy recovery as well.
Thank you.
The next up with their hand raised is Liz.
Hi, this is Liz Cardman of Urbana, and I just wanted to make a comment about the plan unit development coming up before you later this evening. I'll be brief, I promise you, very brief. Historic resources at the Urbana archives confirm that all 10 structures being demolished were originally built as single-family houses or duplexes. And in their place, the developer is proposing one massive complex. That's 10 for 1. This massive complex blatantly contradicts the spirit of the Lincoln-Busey Corridor Guidelines, which require that any new development be compatible with the fabric of the adjoining R2 neighborhood. Further, it's been granted a footprint that is 50% more than is allowable by right. For such extraordinary exemptions from the corridor guidelines and zoning regulations, an equivalently extraordinary public benefit and emphasis on quality development must be realized. Opposing Alice Campbell Hall, this complex will represent the face of Urbana to the face of the university and its alumni. I ask that you rigorously review this proposal to ensure that all of the DRB's conditions for excellence in design are met to the fullest before moving it forward for approval by the full council. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up is Julie Watkins.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Julie Watkins, and I've lived in Urbana. You've cut my, I need to see my notes. I've lived in Urbana since 1976. I have public input about comments made last week. I wanted to say thank you to Therese Hersey for her comments that Carl needs to do better about vaccination. Homebound doesn't mean others in that home or building aren't going in and out for jobs and may be exposing that person. We shouldn't accept herd immunity by default for poor or crowded. The township vote showed that it's Urbana values to care about everyone, and people making plans that don't include homebound need to take note. Also last week, people made comments about Aaliyah Lewis, and there was no council response that I remember. I am still flummoxed that there have been no apology and that charges have not been dropped. You've made resolutions and all, but now how much trust can we have when there's video of police using excessive, unnecessary force and the victim is still under felony threat? An apology would be nice, but the felony threat is a real problem. Council's silence is perplexing. How does this help Urbana values? Now that the primary is over, could you please? Thank you to other commenters, and thank you to the council for considering this.
Thank you. Next up is Haki. Haki, you're muted. Haki, there you go.
Okay, my fault. I didn't even hear you. I'm sorry. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Haki. Recent graduate of the University of Illinois in Community Health, Senior Project Manager of Naturopath Nutrition, co-founder of CC ARC, and a member of Black Students for Revolution. I'm calling because, first, let me say I'd like to give a shout out to my brother, Lamont Peppers, for reaching out regarding the continuation of the racial pod discussions and meeting with me regarding other initiatives for the community. So I thank him for that. I had a nice interaction with officers. I know it's not crazy. I mean, it's crazy to hear nice. Now, just because I say it was a nice interaction does not mean I am still not an abolitionist and believe in transformative justice for the people and for especially vulnerable populations. When I say a nice interaction, the officers were receptive to some of the suggestions that I had. Officers were restraining a brother, I believe Thursday night, and I believe the MTD called 911 because I guess the brother stated or, threatened to punch somebody on the bus. Upon leaving work, I noticed the officers there restraining the brother, and so I did what I always do, approach the scene, phone recording. Now, upon arrival at the scene, the brother was yelling, acting, as you probably would say, erratic. But the brother also stated that he wanted to go to an ambulance. He needed to go to the hospital. He even stated that he wanted to be in a psych ward. So if the brother is saying that he wants to be in a psych ward, he is actively asking for help that is needed. Upon arriving at the scene, I started to talk to the brother. I asked what was his name. I asked, had he eaten? He stated that he had not eaten in 3 days, right? I also asked, where did he live? Did he have a home? He said he has a home. I said, where do you live? And he stated he lives everywhere. And so when I say officers being receptive, I was trying to be there for the brother to ensure his safety and that he can make it and live tomorrow. I felt there are certain other things I felt that I could have done, but again, because of the situations that we have with community and police, I decided to not take it any further. However, the officer, Sergeant McKinney, he was receptive to me speaking to the brother to ensure that he was calm. However, again, there is need for improvement. The best improvement is abolition, but again, there's a work in progress in how we can implement transformative justice. In this area, this was downtown Urbana. Downtown Urbana has multiple organizations that are committed to social justice, including the Cunningham Township, and I'm sure MTD is committed to that, as well as they have received funding from United Way for racial healing and whatnot. I asked the officer, did you give him, you should all carry food, water, snacks, blankets. I think I've said that multiple times on these calls, and he said he's never heard of that, suggestion, but he said, it was a great suggestion. Because simple questions like, did you eat today? And he said that he had not eaten in 3 days. It shows you why J. Edgar Hoover said the breakfast program was the dangerous program, because we know what happens when people are hungry. They're hangry, right? And there already is injustice. So let us really think about officers, when we're talking about defunding, officers paying for the snacks, the food, the waters, and supplying that. They also should have pillows. As the brother tried to hit his head against the ground, but one of the officers had to hold his head up, that's a very uncomfortable position. And if he is homeless, he's probably living on the streets. So at least having a pillow in the plastic bag, so for sanitary purposes, that can aid in that. And this can also aid in the creation of the rehabilitation zones where community organizations can designate individuals to respond to these police interactions with homeless
Aki,
individuals.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, your time is up. Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Next up is James TGR Corbin.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, all right. Thank you. James Corbin, Urbana, Illinois, First Followers, Community Outreach Specialist and Navigator. This is just a quick update to some information I was given last time about the how to activate the COVID funds for the landlord. And the landlords cannot activate these funds. It's up to the tenant to do that. Instead, the landlord is looked on as a liaison or to make sure that the tenant has all paperwork in, as well as verifying anything that the tenant is saying that is COVID related or they cannot meet bills. So this is causing a real problem. And I think this is already adding more strife to an already overburdened situation and crisis that we're dealing with in the street due to COVID and other issues right now at this time. The landlords are also expected to do the normal landlord duties, maintenance and everything else, with no income or money coming in, as well as, you know, meeting their needs and trying to pay taxes on their property. Now, I'm not just speaking for the landlord, but I'm speaking for the tenant and the landlord, because these two are intertangled or tied together. And if we don't, you know, if we don't address both issues at this time, we're going to be dealing with a much greater issue in the near future. You know, and if the landlord cannot get to these funds and the tenant is having a hard time gathering information and having a difficult time getting through the line, because if you call that line, 1877 line, they send you to Help Illinois Family Service. Then they'll send you back to RPC, and then it's this constant cycle of back and forth, which is getting frustrating, you know. And so I'm giving this as a warning, you know, just trying to help us out before we see this greater issue in the future of both trying to house a tenant and a landlord soon, and as well as the city not being able to get the taxes needed to run the city. You know, we're gonna have to figure out a way to make this much easier, because this process that's there now is very cumbersome. It's not effective, and they are not receiving the funds. And also, the landlords are still not ready to or wanting to rent out just to go through this process. This is a headache. What are we going to do about it? This community, I care about it. I'm in the street daily, talking one-on-one with individuals as well as landlords, the business people alike. And I got my finger on the pulse as well as my team. And I'm giving you this warning that we need to make this less cumbersome. So, and that's all I want to say. I thank you. And that's it.
Thank you. Paul Debovic.
Hi, this is Paul. I say Debevic, but it's not an easy name.
I apologize.
No, not an easy name. So I made some comments at the January 14th Design Review Board meeting concerning the energy and sustainability issues of the proposed planned unit development that you'll have on your agenda in a little bit. And I have to say I'm pleased that the new proposal does respond to a number of the energy and sustainability concerns. You have before you a better building, but it certainly won't win any awards. The roof, the floor, and the walls are now well insulated. The windows, not so much. No change to them. So they could be better. But, I have to go back to the initial question I raised. Why not net zero? A net zero building could be an attractive selling point to individuals concerned about climate change and having a better future. And it would be wonderful to have a net zero building right opposite Alice Campbell Hall. So they did look at geothermal. It's not appropriate for the site. They do have the ability to install solar panels, but why not do it now? The proposal says that they will wait for a state subsidy. But in fact, the state subsidies are really quite minimal. It's a lottery. Urbana lost in these lotteries many times. They'll probably lose in the lottery too. There is already an ample federal tax credit available for solar panels, and many people in the neighborhood have put solar panels on their homes already, not hoping for a state of Illinois subsidy. They say that they will put Energy Star appliances. Well, of course they should. But the air conditioning that they've specified is not impressive at all. It's a SEER rating of 14. There are technologies of heating air conditioning where SEERs of 20 to 30 are possible. So they could do much, much better. And of course that lowers the utility bill for all of the tenants, lowers energy usage, and it's the right thing to do. They have some electric vehicle charging stations already. That's good to see. And I'll have to say, we want to be a progressive community. There are communities that are building net zero already. There's the Geos neighborhood in Arvada, Colorado. There's Vermont Homes in White River Junction, Vermont. I sent out a message to our neighborhood listserv asking if there are people who want to have their concerns about the PUD brought before you, but don't have the time to send out an email. I got 13 responses. 4 people probably will be sending you a letter. So the neighborhood is concerned about this building. I'm sure you'll hear from many people about the overall design and the fact that it does not follow the DRB board conditions. I think you really ought to send it back to the DRB and not approve it tonight. Thanks very much for your attention, and I'll listen further on to your considerations.
Thank you. Next up is Justin Hendricks.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Justin Michael Hendricks, Champaign-Urbana resident, Parkland College student, community engineer, creator of Hidden Homeboy. Hidden Homeboy, Downward Boys and Girls Club, and myself would like to thank everyone for the contributions, promotions, viewership, and more for our Black History Month Trivia Night. Congratulations to all the winners. Thank you to our sponsors, BC Bank, Rita Connolly, Megan McDonald, Tanya, and United Mag Action Magazine, Neil Street Blues, Tasty Treats, CBPB Popcorn, Farron's, also William Patterson and Hip Hop Express. Lastly, thank you to the city of Urbana for recognizing Hidden Homeboy when assessing the situations, knowing we produce a people's first approach, ensuring the enhancement of our most impoverished communities and vulnerable populations. And most importantly, spreading the humankind of humanity over charity. Again, thank you to the city of Urbana. I believe one or all should take into consideration what Mr. Tiger, First Followers, has said and shared with you all today with the unfortunate situations regarding tenants in housing and socioeconomic disparities and discriminatory processes, as we must be able to help our people and put them in substantial and better housing than what they're currently in. Mrs. Underwood, sending you a speedy recovery as BJC is a great medical facility in St. Louis. And as the good book would say, when one or two are gathered, God is with them. So I do give you those condolences on a speedy recovery back on your way back from St. Louis, and sending love and comfort to Leah Lewis. As the city has been warm, as the city has been cold, however, I feel the warmth is coming soon on your side. With that being said, thank you, everybody. Take care. Good night.
Thank you. Next up is Alan Max Axelrod.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
All right. Could you put the clock up, please? Thank you. So I wanted to echo some previous remarks that were made, namely from Taga about the need for additional avenues through which people can access financial aid. That's extremely important, whether it is rent or utilities. And I had been messaged by folks about both supports today. So I know that you all are expected to pass that. I hope that you do. I also wanted to say, because I know that the city of Champaign has delayed easements of Ameren, Illinois' development. I do not want that. No one from No Ameren Shutoffs that I know of wants that. I want to be very clear. We are not about trying to do anything petty, despite what some people may advertise. Illinois American Water is the bad faith actor right now. Ameren, Illinois may not be the bad faith actor until April. So currently they are operating in good faith. They have disconnected one person in December, one person in January, and they were in the north and south of the state. Hopefully they don't disconnect anybody in February, but I have my doubts. Illinois American Water, as you know, has still, to the best of my knowledge, not sent water shutoff notices to the CU Public Health District. While people are getting vaccinated, I don't know that we have a socioeconomic analysis of the people who are getting vaccinated, but the ones that exist, say in Chicago, show, and also down in Carbondale, show a socioeconomic disparity between the people who are able, and a racial disparity for the people who are able to access the vaccines and the people who are most gravely affected. So please keep that in mind as we proceed towards the potential resumption of utility shutoffs. And please go through with the votes for the easement and for the additional supports. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Tracy Chong.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Tracy Chong from Urbana. I'll keep.
Next up on the agenda is a staff report. Do we have a staff report? Carol Minton.
I have a little something to share, and then I believe Chief Seraphin is going to join as well and give a little update on some vandalism that happened last night. So you might have noticed that we didn't start the council training tonight as we thought we would. We have a few logistical things to work out, and so we won't be starting that until March 15th, and that will be at 6 p.m. And we still have a few moving parts, so we'll be sharing a schedule with you soon. As I think I mentioned earlier, we want to start this process even before the general election because there's a lot of information to cover. But the first few sessions of training are going to be high-level overviews of what the departments do. It's just sort of a beginning, high-level introduction to the departments, how they're funded in a very general way, and how people can expect to be interacting with the departments. And then later on, we're going to do some deeper dives into some more complex topics, like TIF, for instance, is not something that's conducive to a little thumbnail sketch. We're also going to work in some half-day weekend sessions and facilities tours. So one of those half-day sessions will be led by the Illinois Municipal League, and that will be on the subject of who runs the city, the roles of the mayor, roles of the council. We have another half-day session, and that'll be led by the clerk's office and legal, and they'll focus on the role of the clerk's office, parliamentary procedure, Open Meetings Act, FOIA, and various other things. So just bear with us, and then once we get things rolling, I think we'll be off to a good start, and we look forward to people taking some extra time to participate in that. So with that, if you wouldn't mind recognizing Chief Bryant Seraphin for another part of the staff report.
Thank you, Carol. Chief Seraphin.
Good evening. So I sometimes only get to come with news that's not so bright. Tonight, I wanted to report in briefly. I got a couple of questions from some council regarding the events of the tire puncture criminal damage events that happened overnight last night. We became aware this morning. On Monday morning, we began to receive some calls on the incidents, and by mid-afternoon, at least by 3 o'clock-ish, we were up to over 100 vehicles had tires punctured. Based on the recreation and then when people had parked and the investigation, it looks like it literally started last night about dusk and then went close to dawn this morning. As far as the affected area, I'm going to refer to my notes here. It was, let's see, it was Washington on the south, Stoughton on the north, and then Busey on the west to Broadway on the east. As a matter of fact, as officers were beginning to receive some phone calls, they have actually begun to canvass the area. And so part of my plea tonight is, even if you found a police officer's business card on your car, on your windshield wipers, please go ahead and still contact us if you have not already done so, especially in that mapped area. Your car might have been included in the report, but we need your victim and contact information for you personally. So we want to make sure that our report is accurate, and so I need people to call us. We've discussed the area and the time. The other thing I want to mention is it's been fairly new, and I know that there have already been videos floating around, is that we're in the era of Ring doorbell and other similar platforms. Share those with us, share those on whatever listservs or other efforts you might have, because this is an event that's in the tens of thousands of dollars. And so we do indeed would like to solve this case, and I know it's already been assigned to a detective as well. So I just wanted to kind of give everywhere we are aware of this. There are, I think it was released this afternoon, a press release, actually some video of the suspect walking in the clothing that that person was wearing last night at the time. So I just wanted to bring this to everyone's attention that we are aware of it and are working on it.
Thank you, Chief. Does anybody have any follow-up for either Carol or the Chief, Mayor?
This isn't follow-up either, but I wanted to add a little more information about the emergency rental assistance that was mentioned earlier. This is being administered, as you know, through the Regional Planning Commission. It's about $6.2 million from the U.S. Treasury. It's available for rent as well as past due utility bills. So at the monthly meeting of the Regional Planning Commission last week, they reported that to date they have about 1,300 appointments that people have made to meet with staff to apply for this assistance. And at this point, they're pausing taking any more names or making appointments until they can work through their list. They've had to hire extra staff to do so. I think ultimately they said they expect to serve about 1,500 households, and rental assistance, they're looking at anywhere from a couple of $100s to over $7,000. So it depends on, you know, what the backlog is for each individual household. But the news is basically they're going to put a pause on taking new appointments until they can start working down the backlog. And they are working with landlords as well and trying to gather the information needed. We also know that in the new $1.3 trillion aid package, there's a great deal of housing assistance and also funding for housing authorities to build affordable housing. So there's going to be a lot more money coming for housing assistance in the future. But at this point, the RPC funds are almost all spoken for, but they're going to get through that backlog first before taking more appointments.
Thank you, ma'am. Next up on the agenda is ordinance number 2021-03-005, an ordinance approving an amendment to a solar facility ground lease. And Public Works, who's going to speak on this?
Good evening. I think the exhibit for these three ordinances really tells the story. This is a slight modification of the easement for the solar developer and the utility company to install some electrical equipment related to the development. I'm also happy to report that the developer is on site and doing vegetation removal. And so we are moving forward with construction. I'll take any questions you have. Thanks.
Any questions for Scott? Jared Miller.
I didn't have a question, but I'd like to make a motion if the chair to entertain it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to move ordinance number 2021-03-005, ordinance approving an amendment to a solar facility ground lease, be sent forward to full council with recommendation for approval, and I'd also suggest that it be added to the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Jared, seconded by Mary Alice, also with the suggestion that we add this to the consent agenda for next week. Is there any discussion? Mary Alice.
I just wanted to address the public comment about the how suitable this property is for this type of solar array. So that's something that we already approved. Scott, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It was around a year ago that we approved that. This is simply an easement to allow the companies to be able to install the electricity lines that need to be used to get the power out of there. So it's not an approval of the whole project. This is just a small piece of it. That approval of the project happened a while ago.
Correct.
Sharice, you had your hand up earlier.
Mary Alice kind of covered the information I wanted to know. And Scott. So.
I believe it looks like we're ready for a vote. Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Sachs,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Okay, that item is approved. Moved on to the City Council for on the consent agenda. Next up is ordinance number 2021-03-006, an ordinance approving an amendment to a solar facility ground lease on the east side. Scott, did you have further comments on this?
It's one memo for all three ordinances. Same condition, just we have two different leases, different parcels, different properties. And then the third ordinance is related to the utility company, Ameren, accessing the same.
Thank you. Any discussion? Dennis?
No, I think that this is just exactly what we discussed just a moment ago. It just has to do with the other half of the property that's under the control of slightly different partnership. So I would move ordinance number 2021-03-006, an ordinance approving an amendment to the solar facility ground lease on the east side, forward to the City Council on a consent agenda with approval. And I'm wondering if we can't also do the same for the next ordinance.
For the record, let me, Phyllis, can we do two, or do we have to have individual votes?
If he's moving both of them at the same time, then just one vote would be enough to move them both to the consent agenda next week.
Thank you. And for the record, I'll just go ahead and read what the next item is. It's ordinance number 2021-03-007, an ordinance approving an easement with Ameren, Illinois. And I believe the motion was for
both of those to be on the consent agenda.
Second.
Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Jared Miller seconds it. Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Sachs,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Okay, that item passes. Well, those two items pass on to full city council on the consent agenda. Next up on the agenda is resolution number 2021-03-008R, a resolution authorizing a federal excess equipment cooperative agreement with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, Urbana Fire Department. Chief Laus.
He's on his phone, so you won't see his face.
No, I am here. Good evening, Chair, Mayor, and Council. I am presenting this resolution to you tonight of the Federal Access Equipment Cooperative through the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. This is a program that I have historically used in the past, both in Peoria and Pekin, that is of quite a benefit to the city. It would allow us to have some access to some excess equipment that we would normally have to purchase that we would get for free. It's basically a loaning program. Historically, you don't ever have to give the equipment back, but it still is, by contract, a loaning program. We have to maintain it. And in the event that the state Illinois Department of Natural Resources will want it back, then they would be able to get the equipment back. Again, historically, they have never done that, but it's still, I want to have full disclosure that is part of that agreement. So some of the stuff that we have, my history that we have been able to acquire in the past were some winter parkas, the heavy coats for our special operations teams, Leatherman multi-purpose tools that we were able to acquire again for the special operations teams. But there are many, many other things. We got some TVs, large screen TVs that we use for our training division so that we can network between stations and just kind of save that travel time as the apparatus were out on the streets normally. But there are just a wealth of different types of equipment. It changes sometimes daily on what is out there as far as what's accessible and available. So, we look on the website, find out what's available, what would fit our needs, and then we would be able to make that request to get that equipment for the city of Urbana. So that's kind of the crib notes on what this program is all about. Like I said, it would help us with some of the excess equipment that we'd normally have to budget for training or other purposes, special operations teams. This would give us the availability to be able to pick that up if it is accessible, if it's posted as a surplus item. So I'll field any questions if I can.
Anybody have any questions of the chief? Mary Alice.
So, Chief, thank you for bringing this to council. I think this is, from what I understand of the program, an excellent proposal. I'm curious if is this the first time, to the best of your knowledge, that the city has participated in this program?
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge, this is the first time that the city of Urbana has participated in it. I haven't seen any history of where we have been in agreement with IDNR for anything like this before.
And is there any specific kind of equipment that you're going to be kind of on the lookout for?
There's a lot of stuff out there that we could use, for training purposes. I named a few of the things a little bit earlier, but they're small tools that we may be able to access whether those are power tools or whether those are hand tools that we can put in our cache of resources to be able to use for those special operations teams. But it's really hard to pinpoint any one thing because things do change often on that. The website is what is accessible.
All right, thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Jared.
And Chief, this is these items come to the city at no cost, correct?
Right. The cost that the city would have is any maintenance of the item as we use it, just like we would for any normal equipment. We would maintain this and keep it up in working order if it's a larger piece of equipment. Most of the stuff that we would look at are disposables. So they're not something that takes a lot of maintenance to keep up. Like the winter parkas that we had gotten back in my history, those are disposable things. They don't want them back. So most of the things that we would look at would be disposable if you would consider it that. So that there's the upkeep maintenance costs would be minimal at best.
Sure. I guess I don't think it's necessary to put in the ordinance, but I would just that you see anything that strikes you as significant enough to notify council, then you should just make the city, or you should email the state, hey, we acquired this $50,000 truck because they had it and we thought we could use it. Something along those lines, just so council is aware of it. Other than that, I think it makes sense to support.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the chief? Dennis Roberts.
I just wanted to say that these are surplus items that wouldn't be used otherwise, so it's appropriate that we try to put them to use. It's fine with me. I think it's a good plan. Thanks for Chief Laus for bringing this forward. I'm willing to make a motion.
Go ahead.
Okay. I move that we adopt and move forward to the City Council with approval resolution number 2021-03-008R, which is a resolution authorizing a federal excess equipment cooperative agreement with the Illinois Department of Natural Resources on behalf of our fire department.
Can we add that to the consent agenda?
Yes, we can. I would adopt that as a consent agenda item.
And I will second that.
Okay, Dennis had the motion. Mary Alice had the second. Any further discussion? Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Sachs,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
With that, the motion passes to the full council on the consent agenda. Chief Laus, thank you for your time.
Thanks so much. I appreciate your time as well.
Next up on the agenda is resolution number 2021-03-009R, a resolution for improvement under the Illinois Highway Code State Motor Fuel Tax for Lincoln and Springfield Resurfacing Project. Public Works Initiative.
Yeah, this is Tim Cowan, interim public works director and city engineer.
Yes, sir.
Just to address this stuff, the Lincoln and Springfield project has kind of been on the docket for the city for 4 or 5 years. It was an internally designed project for a mill and overlay with some adjacent improvements to deteriorated curb and gutter, sidewalks, things of that nature. This will address the area from University down to Green Street. Essentially, this is within our CIP. Stipulation of using state motor fuel tax funds is resolving through the council to do so, and then gaining authorization from the state to use those funds for these purposes.
Thank you. Bill Brown.
Yeah, thanks. On the estimates, they seem refined from the original estimate. Does that mean that they've already gone out for bid and we have a bid already?
We do not have a bid yet. Part of that is just inflation through the years. The other part is we're likely going to be engaging consultant oversight on this as well due to depleted staff for this project at this time as well.
Okay. And then one of the functions of our Human Relations commission is to go through the various potential contractors and do an EEO analysis and assessment of them. But I haven't seen that lately, so how does that work when we do go out for bid? Do we already have like a list of approved vendors that are allowed to bid, or if somebody new wants to bid, they have to go through a process?
Yeah, essentially there's whoever, if there's a new contractor that's not EEO certified with us, they'll be required to gain EEO certification through the HR commission. That's a provision of the contract documents.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Mary Alice.
So I know that with the Gather project on the southeast corner of Lincoln, one of the things that they were going to do is reconstruct that sidewalk. In this, it says sidewalk patching. Are there plans to also have removal of those sidewalks and just completely reinstall them?
At this time, no. We are coordinating with the Gather on tying these projects together since they've got ongoing construction and we'll be coming up to them. But essentially, the purpose of this is to address any non-compliant ADA ramps and then any other non-compliant ADA sidewalk or deteriorated curb and gutter. It's not going to replace all the sidewalk along the corridor as part of this.
Okay, I know that on the west side, that sidewalk that's closer to University is not that good of shape. I used to walk that area quite a bit up to Einstein Bagel Building. My second question is this about roughly $200,000 over what was estimated a couple of years ago, inflation and so forth. And you had said in the memo that the $226,000 will be transferred from another project, the Savannah Green project. Does this mean that that project, it sounds to me like that project is going to cost less than was originally anticipated, so that is still slated to be worked on, or is that project now on hold?
No, you're correct. Essentially, I think in the FY21 and probably 22, we're going to look at doing kind of a study phase initially on that to try to address, let's say, 2 or 3 different options for the area. The budget reflects full reconstruction of everything. I think it's probably worthwhile and in our best interest to kind of look at some rehabilitation alternatives to that to help reduce our cost burden.
Okay. All right. Those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
I can make a motion.
Yes. Go ahead.
Unless somebody else has a question. Whoops,
Sharice, did you have a question? You're muted, Sharice.
I guess I'm trying to understand. It says the proposed improvement shall consist of, well, one of the things it says is median removal and replacement. These are the medians going down Lincoln?
Yes, they're part of the project. Basically gets into a few areas along Lincoln that have some existing medians in there.
Mm-hmm.
Some of that is due to just deterioration of those medians.
Okay, and my other question is also, I was looking at where on Springfield, I suppose some of this will take place, and it says west of Kohler Avenue. But the one thing I've noticed when I drive down Springfield is that right at Lincoln and Springfield, the road is kind of raggedy. Is there going to be any improvement to that particular intersection?
Yes, yeah, we're going to go, that entire intersection will be addressed within the pavement boundaries. And we call it Lincoln and Springfield because of all the other crossroads that we're crossing. The other ones were really just kind of tying back into the radius points. Springfield, we're actually extending down both east and west a little bit outside of that.
Okay, so where the Mennonite church is on Springfield, that's what I'm talking about. It's like that is a really dangerous area for not just vehicles, but for people. So so improvements will be made in that area.
I'm better with intersections. Forgive me. Is that near the intersection of Springfield and Lincoln, or is that another intersection?
It's like east, just right on that corner of Springfield and Lincoln, and I believe, and there's a lot of just bad potholes and broken asphalt in that at the stoplight.
Yes, without looking at the plans, having the plans in front of me, I would anticipate that is included in this area. We extend a fair amount off of Lincoln both directions on Springfield.
Okay.
Probably not an entire block either direction, but we're well over half a block in one direction. I think about a half block in the other direction.
Okay.
Bill Brown?
Does this include the intersection with Main and Lincoln?
Main and Lincoln. I should pull a map up.
Yeah. It would.
Springfield, Maine, once you cross over Lincoln.
It's green to University. So
that would include Maine.
I believe that would include that area, yes.
There was some special intersection treatment planned for that intersection with wider median and some special crossing signs and some bicycle facilities to get across the intersection. Is that part of this project?
Yes.
That is not. Is it, Shannon?
Yes, sorry, I didn't realize it. All of the stuff Craig Schonkweiler brought to BPAC is included in this project for that intersection.
Okay. So that's the same as what we saw last time a year or two ago, I guess it was.
Yeah, no design has changed since you last saw it.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Any other questions? Do you have a motion?
Make a motion.
Go ahead.
I would move resolution number 2021-03009R, resolution for improvement under the Illinois Highway Code state motor fuel tax for Lincoln and Springfield resurfacing project to City Council for approval on the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
Mary Alice moved and Sharice seconded. Any further discussion?
I do have a question because the next resolution is for improvement under the Illinois Highway Code for Race Street. Is this the same type of resolution as that we're getting ready to vote on right now?
It is a similar scenario. Race Street from California to Washington, mill and overlay, addressing ADA non-compliant ramps, and some additional ancillary concrete work based on deterioration of concrete.
I don't know if anybody wants to consider that they both be on the consent agenda. And if we can try to vote for both of these right now. Is that possible, Ms. Clark?
Yes, if the person that moved the motion agrees to that.
Okay.
And I think that was Mary Alice.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing is we will have discussion, so I just ask that if people have questions to staff about this project, that's also covered within discussion of these two resolutions. So if that's the case, then I'm happy to add that one as well.
Okay, just for the record, let me go ahead and read it. Resolution number 2021-03-010R, a resolution for improvement under the Illinois Highway Code state motor fuel tax for Race Street resurfacing project. So Mary Alice, you agree that that is included in your motion for the consent agenda, and Sharice, you agree that's your second as well?
It's fine with me if it's okay with Mary Alice.
Yeah.
And we can discuss the Race Street project as well before we take a vote.
Okay, Dennis, you had your hands up.
Yeah, I guess it was just wondering, and I'm not quite sure. Do either of these resolutions require a different kind of vote when we come to a city council? Does we already got many items on the consent agenda, which I don't think the mayor necessarily has to vote on. Is that correct? But if these are budgeted area, if these are concern the budget and a change in the budgeting of our city, then does the mayor have to vote on them? And is that a different kind of vote? Would we be able to do those on the consent agenda? I guess that'd be for Phyllis Clark to help us with.
Oh, okay.
So I just was wondering is whether the consent agenda items we've already placed on that agenda require the mayor's vote to pass them, and would these two items, which may have to do with budget changes or adoption of I mean, they may not, but if they do, is the mayor required to vote them?
Only on items that would deal with the budget transfer, she would be able to vote on that. But as I see this, I don't think that there's any reason that the mayor would need to vote on this at any time, actually.
Okay, then thanks. That's what my question is, and I guess you answered it.
Ms. Hannon, did you have something else that you want to add?
I just wanted to make sure that question about the budget got answered.
Okay. Mary Alice?
I just noticed there's actually no resolutions attached to either of these. As I go through, we have I guess we have a resolution for improvement under the Illinois Highway Code, but that's not in the traditional resolution format that we normally see.
This is Tim speaking. Because of the state motor fuel tax funding, this is a form required by the state to pass the resolution. So anything requiring state motor fuel tax funds uses this form.
So would it be appropriate for us to actually have a resolution which references the form rather than just using the state resolution for improvement? It just seems odd to me.
This is a standard practice in my past experience.
Phyllis?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you be able to answer that if we need the standard format that we normally use for resolutions on this that would reference this specific IDOT document?
No, what you have right now is all that has been as long as I've been the clerk. They've sent it that way through the state.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that whatever we're voting on was actually correct.
Yeah.
I did have a quick question, if that's okay. So by my quick calculations, it looks like this is 3 blocks. So Nevada, Oregon, and California. And on those 3 blocks, we will be resurfacing those 3 blocks and then creating a sidewalk ramp reconstruction on Ray Street between Washington Street and California Avenue. So that's 6 different sidewalk cutouts there. Is there a reason why we didn't extend this resurfacing all the way up to Illinois?
I'm not sure. That was part of the CIP prior to me being here. I think we've done improvements up to north of California, if I remember correctly. I think there's been some resurfacing more recently than this portion.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, thank you.
Carol, did you have something else to add?
I was just going to say that the scope of the project was established before I got here, before Tim got here, probably before Shannon got here. So we've just been pushing this along. But I think Bill's got the best explanation, which is we had done work on another section prior.
Yeah.
Dennis.
Yeah, and I think we have, and I think that it's the reason that you might be concerned about it is because it's a major school crossing for elementary and junior high school students in Illinois, but I think that was handled already.
So we have a motion on the floor and a second to include both these resolutions to pass this on to the full city council on the consent agenda. Any more discussion before we call for a vote? Ms. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Sachs,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Okay, those items pass, like I said, with recommendation for approval to the full city council on the consent agenda. Next up on the agenda is ordinance number 2020-12-070, an ordinance approving a preliminary development plan for a planned unit development, 602 South Lincoln Avenue, CCH Development LLC and CMH Development LLC, plan case 2411-PUD-20. Somebody from community development is going to possibly speak to this.
Kevin. Right here, Bill. Good evening. So I'm going to try and be a bit brief with my presentation, and then I'm going to turn it over to the design team and the applicant to go in a little bit more depth on some of these points. Well, let's get down to it. So back on December 7th of last year, the Committee of the Whole discussed these two ordinances for this proposed planned unit development at 602 South Lincoln Avenue. And then after discussion, the committee voted to forward the case to a future city council meeting. And that was to give time for the design review board to hold a hearing on the project's design, since this is in the Lincoln-Busey design corridor. On January 14th, the design review board held that hearing, and then they voted unanimously to approve the project with 7 conditions, which I'll discuss here in a minute. And then, so since that time, in response to that DRB discussion and the conditions that they put forth, the initial Committee of the Whole discussion back from December, some suggested revisions that that staff received from Alderpersons Sachs and Wu, which is in your memo Exhibit J, and then in subsequent discussions with staff. Based on all of that, the applicant has now revised their plans and has agreed to make some additional commitments to address specific areas that were brought up during all of those discussions and hearings. In short, the revised plans and commitments would preserve more trees on the site. They would incorporate more sustainable building practices than the original proposal. At the design review board, as I mentioned, they approved the design with 7 conditions. I'll go through those quickly here. The first is our typical standard condition for any project like this, that the proposed building and parking area are in general compliance with the plans that were submitted. The second condition is to accept a different masonry material that is in the Lincoln-Busey design guidelines approved materials list as an alternate to the stone masonry. So essentially the design review board approved the proposed stone cladding, but they allowed for some flexibility in case council wanted to approve another type of masonry that is allowed in that district. Similarly, condition 3 is that the design review board approved the proposed engineer wood siding, but they had a condition to accept natural wood lap siding, shake, or shingles as an alternative to that engineered wood siding if council so chose. Condition 4 is to allow for a reduction of the parking area, essentially to preserve trees, and then taking into consideration a reduction in parking spaces. I'll get into a little bit more depth on that here in a minute when I talk about waivers, but I wanted to state that as that was one of the conditions here. The fifth condition is that the permeable pavement be permeable pavers. So they had proposed permeable, I believe it was asphalt or no, it was permeable concrete. And this condition would require that they use permeable pavers, and then to allow permeable pavers in other parts of the site, or in other parts of the parking lot, and not just the areas originally proposed. Condition 6 would allow solar panels to be installed on the rooftops without requiring that the design come back to the design review board for additional approval. And then finally, the 7th condition was that canopy trees would be added to the landscape plan. And so essentially, the original landscape plan included removing, here, I'll just share my screen here to show this difference. So this is the updated plan. So the initial plan had proposed removal of the 5 trees here that I'm highlighting along Lincoln Avenue. But this new proposal, they had moved the, so the condition of the design review board was that since they were taking out trees there, they would need to put in additional canopy trees. Instead of that, they're just preserving those trees to begin with. So we can discuss that in a little bit more detail if needed. I stopped sharing my screen, but also on that plan, that the sidewalk has been moved further to the east, which would allow those existing trees to be preserved. With respect to zoning waivers, you may recall the applicant had originally requested 1 waiver, which was to allow an increase in the floor area ratio. I made an error in the staff memo. I said that would be approximately an increase of 25%. As Liz Cardman mentioned earlier in public comment period, she was correct. She said it would be closer, or it would be around 50%. The 25% was a reference to what is existing on site, because what's on site is already beyond what the underlying zoning allows. But the way that we stated that in the staff memo was not too clear. So apologize for that error. So in addition to that requested waiver, the board, as I mentioned, approved a condition to allow a reduction in the number of parking spaces to preserve more of the trees on the site. Now, to reduce the parking spaces beyond what they have now, which is the minimum required by the zoning ordinance, that would require a waiver by city council as part of the plan unit development process to allow the parking to be reduced by 5 spaces. We on staff think this is a reasonable request. We conducted a parking usage study, some of you may recall, back in 2017 for apartment buildings in West Urbana. Specifically, we wanted apartment buildings that were close to the university. And based on that parking study data and the proximity of this development to the University of Illinois campus, we feel that there's an adequate amount, there is an adequate amount of parking proposed here with the 45 spaces. This is especially reasonable since it would allow more trees to be preserved and a couple more trees to be planted in that parking area. Now the applicant has revised their plans, as I mentioned, since the committee of the whole initially saw the plans, and they revised them to meet those conditions of the DRB. And they have committed to do the following. So the first is to, as I mentioned, preserve all trees along Lincoln Avenue, and they would install new canopy trees on all 3 sides of the site. There are a couple spots where there are driveways that they're taking out, and so now there is space. If they take out those driveways, there's now space for canopy trees. Number 2 is to make all buildings solar ready, and then to install solar panels if the state of Illinois enacts a new solar renewable energy credit program. The third is to install at least 4 electric vehicle charging stations, and then to make other parking spaces that are underneath the buildings EV ready, so they could easily install future or charging stations in the future, pardon me. And then the fourth is to make all buildings approximately 17% more energy efficient than is currently required by the building code. So the design review board had their hearing. They've reviewed the design. They've approved the design with, with those conditions, with some flexibility built in there. And now council needs to review the planned unit development proposals for consistency with the goals that are outlined in section 13 of the zoning ordinance. The original proposed development was generally consistent with goals 1 through 7 of that part of the zoning ordinance, and the changes that the applicant is now committed to only further the goals of the PUD ordinance, specifically by preserving more trees and by implementing the more sustainable building technology into their plans, and parking technology, I should add. So the staff recommends that the committee of the whole review the updated plans and then consider the conditions, the 6 conditions that are laid out in the memo. Just for sake of brevity, I won't go through those, but I'd be happy to answer any questions about those or anything else you might have. And then I know, so it looks like we already have Jacob Unsicker and Josh Daly. It looks like they've been added from the participants list. Chris Hartman was not available. He is the developer, but I believe I saw Will Thompson is also there. So if we could also add Will Thompson to the panelist list, that would be great.
And it looks like he has been as well.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody from council have any questions for Kevin? Bill Brown.
Just on the sidewalk moving closer to the building, it looks like it'll be within a few feet of there's 2 entrances, I think, on Lincoln Avenue for pedestrians. I can't tell how far inset those entrances are, but we've had problems before on North Goodwin at University, where at the last minute there were some changes and the sidewalk ended up going right next to a building, and somebody opened a glass door and somebody on a bicycle ran into the glass door. So is this sidewalk going to be so close to the building where that might be an issue?
I'm not sure. That's probably a good question to ask the architects.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. This is Josh with Mode 3. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
All right. I can answer that question. There are no doors that would be swinging out onto that sidewalk at all. So the entrances that we have shown are actually where you would simply walk through under a covered walkway to get from the sidewalk through to the parking area. So
okay, so
there's no doors there, and we've tried to soften between the sidewalk and the building with some landscaping as well to make that so that it's not right up on the building.
Okay.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think so.
Dennis, did you have your hand raised earlier?
Dennis, you're muted right now.
Thanks, I was. So thank you. A couple of concerns were raised generally about the design aspects of the project. I appreciate the fact that quite a few of the concerns relating to permeability and trees are addressed more readily and more to, I think, to the satisfaction of the community. And one of the things that has been raised is the materials being used on the facades. I understand that the original block or stone material that you were originally planning, you have changed now to a smaller, more brick-like stone material. I tried to go into the city building today to look at these materials, which are on display in the community development room, but I was not able to get in because there was nobody physically present in the community development office to let me in. And the individual who I was referred to request access into those rooms never contacted me during the afternoon. So I have not been able to look at and to evaluate the whatever stone or rock facade material the developer is switching to get an idea of what it looks like, which is, I think, a problem for us to understand how the building is ultimately going to be dressed as far as the facade goes. And the other aspect of that is that all the buildings that are across the street at the university are dressed in brick, which is, you know, your typical red brick construction. And the community has voiced a concern that this building needs to look more like the buildings that are relating to it across the street and up and down the block, or into the neighborhood directly behind it, which is mostly either you know, stucco surface or brick. And so I'm wondering, since it doesn't seem that the fabricated clapboard paneling meets the requirements of the standard of materials that are in the Busey corridor guidelines currently, and that are we considering something that now will be within the guidelines of the Busey corridor parameters as far as the quality of the materials go? So it sounds like some of the materials that are being suggested for the development don't meet the requirements of quality for the Lincoln Busey corridor guidelines. Can we address that? And is the developer willing to consider brick as one of the masonry choices to supplement the removal of stone, which was not preferred by the community?
Well, I can let the architects respond to the question of alternatives that they would consider. I do want to state that the design review board did approve the materials that are proposed. So
they did, but I listened to the entire discussion of the design review board. They were not very enthusiastic about it, and they might have actually made a decision, except for they felt that they would let the city council make this decision. Yeah, I wish that they had said absolutely not, that we don't accept these materials, but they were not guided to empower themselves to make that decision, which I think they could have. So now we're in the city council chamber addressing some of the questions that the community brings up. And I don't think that as I remember the conversation in the design review board, they wanted to improve the quality of the materials, and it was discussed at length, especially the clapboard. So yeah, I'd like to hear from the developer how flexible they are in material facade choices, and can we consider brick rather than stone or whatever the material was that I was not able to see this afternoon.
Is there somebody from the design team that can address that?
Yeah, this is Josh with Mode 3 with the design team. I guess I'll start off. This idea of emulating something across the street came up during our thoughts, but we felt that bringing something on the University of Illinois campus across the street to a neighborhood was not something that was appropriate. This is a residential neighborhood. It's not the University of Illinois campus. Those buildings over on campus are a completely different animal. This is meant to look like small residences, 1-story, 2-story, 3-story, purposely broken up into 5 buildings. None of that really exists on the campus. So the architecture was to add more character than just going red brick and a flat roof, which is what's on campus. We got sloped roofs, we got metal roofs. I think that bringing something from University of Illinois campus over to this block is not a good design decision. That was our position after we studied this. There's other places that it probably would be appropriate if there was more commercial buildings along this side of the street, perhaps. I could see that. Maybe the block to the north or the south has a gigantic fraternity building or sorority building that has lots of brick, maybe 3 or 4 stories. Maybe then we would consider something like that. But the position was to do a stone that has some character. The stone is going to give a more rich texture. It's going to give better shadow lines. It's going to give some warmth. Quite often, brick is a little more streamlined, not as much character. And we are actually emulating something that I would call maybe a quasi craftsman look to this project, which is very Midwestern, very Urbana. You see it all around. Horizontal lap siding is used everywhere. The vertical siding that we're showing is kind of a old look as well that was used 100 years ago. Anything that we're showing here is nothing out of the ordinary in terms of the character of something that was, it's nothing new, let's put it that way. So we felt that that was more appropriate for this block rather than to bring a red brick over from across the street, to put it that way. That was our position. We think it goes better too with the sloped roofs. The stone does. And quite often, sometimes the stone with the shadows that are cast from the stone, it can bring the scale of the building down as well. Sometimes the brick can make it look larger because brick has a running bond and it looks more repetitive. So walls quite often look larger. I don't want to bore you with too many more design details. I'll probably put everybody to sleep, but those are the things that we thought about. We really consciously looked at this hard. I want you to know that. I understand the feeling, hey, why don't we just mimic that and bring it over here? But I thought it was more appropriate to try to mimic other blocks of the neighborhood. Now, there's no single one style that you're seeing in any of these neighborhoods. It's different. It's very different. Every block has its own little micro environment, honestly, from block to block. It is amazing. So I felt that that was more appropriate to keep that character rather than try to bring something from the university. So that's kind of my position on that. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Josh. Mary Alice, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, so thank you for that perspective. My thoughts are this. I agree, as the design review board, you're supposed to look at the east side. Alice Campbell is on the west side of Lincoln. But there's certainly different examples of brick being used that is not so massive. So my take is basically this corridor is supposed to ensure that we don't have massive buildings in this Lincoln-BC corridor. And I think that the neighborhood is concerned about the quality of the materials. So it's not necessarily the fact that this is mimicking a craftsman house. I went through several of the blocks, both east, west, south, north, sorry, not west. The vast majority of those different buildings and houses over there are brick, and there's quite a number of stucco ones, just like Dennis had mentioned. Part of this is that the engineered wood doesn't really do justice to the different styles within the area, which is why we proposed having brick or natural wood. There's also cedar shingles that I've seen around that area. And even to the east of the building, there is a pretty big 3-story brick building. And so I think in the design review guidelines, it says if any building is on the corner, that you're supposed to also take into consideration the building to the east of that, which is that brick building. So I guess I'm going to push back a little bit with the analysis of that neighborhood. And in my opinion, even if we don't mimic the Alice Campbell building, there are plenty of examples to the north and the south and even to the east of brick being used a lot. And plenty of examples with the wood siding or the cedar shakes. So if you could address how you chose that engineered wood in lieu of those other materials.
This is Jacob. I'll chime in. Real quick, let me share my screen too. See if this will help. So this is a view of the building to show the most recent renderings that we've completed for the project to show the materials that we're talking about. I guess before I move on to the engineered wood, just talking about the stone still, the stone material, as we understand it, is approved as one of the varieties of material that could be used on the exterior. And we work with our client to try to develop some kind of an aesthetic that they also are proud of and want for their project. So we try to adhere as best we can to the guidelines of that corridor, but then also deliver to our client a look that they're going for. And so we had looked at brick, but the way these things go, a lot of aspects kind of tie together, and when you make certain decisions, a lot of things kind of go from there. So a lot of things are tied together, and to change one thing may change some other things. And going with brick was going to take the look away from what the ownership was actually looking to go with for this development. Now I will say it would be really good if you can actually go see those materials in person.
I did go see them in person.
All right, that's good. I know Dennis said he wasn't able to. In terms of the quality, I think that especially the stone, I don't know that there should be a question of the quality at all on that. It's actually real stone that would be applied to the exterior of the building. Now, what I will say, I'll see if I can pull up some other options here. That there are some different configurations of stone that might be a possible option that would not change too much of the aesthetic, but maybe would give a look that might be more agreeable. So the one that's on the screen now is the type of stone that is at the city building right now, which is more of a randomized kind of modular unit. But there are some other options from the same manufacturer. For example, this is a more of a linear stacked type stone material. And again, I've grayscaled these images because the colors are different and you can't get the same colors in every style, but I figure we could show the different shapes maybe for this this part of the discussion. So this is also a possibility to go with something more like this. It's a little bit smaller of a modular unit. And again, it gives more of a linear stacked look. And then kind of an in-between look from those two is this other one, which has got some more rectangular blocks, which are, again, a little bit larger size, but it gives a little bit more of a geometric, a regular geometry, I suppose, is a way to point that out. So the ownership is willing to be flexible on that, if that is helpful. One thing too about the selections of the materials is coming up with a color scheme, and so depending on what colors are used on the rest of the facade, that may change how we are able to select a particular type of stone. Again, not every color is available, but there are some options I think that would be very close to what is shown right now, just in a different configuration of stone. So that's the stone. Let me go back to so the engineered wood siding as well. That decision was kind of driven by the fact that the engineered wood siding is, in our opinion, after researching it, is a relatively high quality material in terms of a siding. I know it's not the same as a stone or a brick, but we're trying to provide a variety of materials on the building. So siding, we felt like, needed to be a significant part of the buildings. So we looked at an engineered product because we can get different styles, configurations. You can get a vertical look with it. You can get a horizontal lap siding. You can get trim pieces together, and you can get this all from a consistent single source. The engineered wood is it's got a 50-year warranty, and we did hear some concerns about the look of it not being perfect in terms of not emulating natural wood perfectly, and we understand that because of the process that's involved. They actually press this material to give it a wood grain look. You can also get it in a smooth finish, but so they do that sometimes with the trim. But the other aspect that I've heard some people say is that it looks, the coating is too shiny. I do have some images I can share of this product on some buildings to kind of show what it looks like in real life. And again, there are samples of this at the city building. The coating that's on the ones that are at the city building is the same coating that's represented in these photographs, and we specified that because it's actually a premium coating that gives a 30-year finish warranty, as opposed to the next step down would be a standard pre-finished treatment, and you can only get a 15-year warranty on that. And then the other option would be to get it primed and then painted at the site. And I'm not sure how long of a warranty we could get for that at all, because that would just be on the painter or the applicator. Whoever applies the finish would have to provide that warranty. So we're trying to make sure that we specify something that is going to allow this product to last a long time. And so that was part of the reason for specifying that type of coating. I'm not sure if maybe the lighting too is maybe a little bit difficult to measure it by when it's inside versus on the outside of the building. I'm not sure if it will seem quite as shiny when it's actually on the building as when it does when you hold it right up to when you're holding it in your hands. But anyway, we think that it's a good product. It's been in use for in its current form for about 25 years. We know that LP SmartSide, which is the product that we're we're looking at heavily has spent a lot of money in research and development to come up with a product that lasts a long time, and that's why they stand by it with a 50-year warranty. It's treated for a lot of things that attack natural wood, and this does include wood, so it would tend to have the same problems if it wasn't treated for that, like insects, moisture, and windborne debris. But it's also, since it's engineered, it's dimensionally stable, and it can be manufactured in longer lengths than you get with natural wood typically, so that would result in reduced labor. And we know that LP SmartSite has a commitment to sustainability too, including being certified with the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, which goes and conducts an audit on an annual basis to ensure that they're adhering to sustainable management practices. It's not real wood, but we feel like it's got a lot of advantages. Maintenance on this is quite a bit less involved than would be with real wood, which does have a pretty high maintenance requirement. So again, I know there's some trade-offs, but we feel like it is a pretty good quality product. And so that was the reason for picking this, and it's available. With that coating, you can get it in a variety of colors, and again, the warranty was really attractive too.
So, I have other comments, but I'll stop if other people have comments so that other people have an opportunity to ask questions.
Eric? You're muted, Eric.
If it's okay, I could share my screen. I had a PowerPoint presentation I'd like to make some points with, address some of the issues that have just been discussed.
Go ahead.
Okay, let's see if I can do this. Right. All right, let me do this. Okay, so an important concept in architecture is to harmonize with the surrounding buildings. That's not the same thing as emulating. So just down the block from the proposed site is this building that was recently constructed on Lincoln and Nevada. And I want you to notice a few things about it. It's in light colored brick. It has surroundings of white rectangular masonry, especially around these windows and over here. You got two different colored bricks, so it breaks it up a bit. And also some large sills that are masonry. And what that does, here's a close-up of the rectangular masonry. What that does is it harmonizes with the building that's right across the street, the Doris Kelly Christopher Hall, where you have light-colored brick and you've got these large white rectangular masonry. This is what it looks like across the street. You got this A-frame, but you've got these large areas around the windows. And it's not mimicking it, it's not emulating it, but it's harmonizing. And so when people are in the neighborhood, their feeling about this building, at least what they've told me, is it's not that bad, at least from this side. And that's because it works with the neighboring buildings. Now, what we have across the street from the proposed site is the Alice Campbell Alumni Center. And apart from being a very busy building where a lot of people come to visit, it's got this darker red brick with some lines of darker brick going across. It's got some accents in rectangular rough cut stone, but primarily it has, again, this rectangular white masonry and these pronounced sills around the windows. We also have an A-frame roof at the top, and of course some very large balconies. This is the building they're proposing across the way. We have the A-frame roof, but what do we have? We have a lot of stone, and mostly what we have is this horizontal and vertical fake wood siding, which doesn't really mesh very well with what's across the street. It also doesn't mesh very well with the brick building that's next door. So, and the other thing you can notice about this, that this takes up 2/3 of a city block and it's all in one style. Whereas everything else in this neighborhood is multiple styles. And so this is one large behemoth, all in one style. It'd be much better to have this part along Lincoln in brick and white masonry, perhaps accents in stone, square, rough cut, similar to the brick further to the south, similar to the new building that's on the corner of University and Lincoln that's also mostly brick, and maybe have these buildings more with the siding. But the siding should be wood because that siding that they have now looks very cheap, and it is cheap. Also, the vertical siding, this is really an accent from the 1970s that nobody appreciates very much these days. I'm afraid to say the comment that I hear most from people from the neighborhood is that this looks ugly, this design. They don't like it. This is what the backside of the Lincoln, Nevada building looks like. It's the fake wood siding. The people in the neighborhood never liked it. They still don't like it. It looks cheap, but it's in the back of the building. But you still notice it when you walk. They like the front of this building better. This is what's there now. You've got a beautiful brick, set of brick duplexes from the 1920s or 30s, again with these big balconies. Remember, the big balconies of the Alumni Center are harmonizing with this building, which will get torn down. There's 2 more of them on the side street. This is an example of a nearby apartment building that's done with vinyl siding. It looks a lot more, the engineered wood siding looks a lot more like the vinyl siding than real wood. It's ugly, it's a mistake, it doesn't last very well. You can see it's already breaking over here. We shouldn't be repeating this kind of mistake. Again, nobody likes the way this looks. This was a mistake. Everyone can say, oh, these past ones, we know those weren't good, and we should avoid making those mistakes again. This is from the DRB, the Lincoln-Busey Corridor Guidelines. These are the exterior materials that are encouraged. What's not on here, what's discouraged, is vinyl siding. And at the time, of course, they probably didn't consider engineered wood siding. It's not mentioned at all, probably because it wasn't readily available. But I would argue it looks a lot more like vinyl than real wood. So I think I'll stop with that. My understanding was that the Design Review Board did not approve the fake wood siding, but instead wanted one of these approved materials. But I guess that's open for interpretation.
Any other questions or comments?
Sorry, I had my video off.
Okay, Mary Alice.
You know, based on what Eric showed, especially based on the fact that there's a lot of brick already, not even looking across the street. There's a lot of brick on the north and the south. There's a lot of wood siding and cedar siding. And in fact, you can put cedar siding with something that is, my personal house has cedar siding and stucco together, whereas the cedar siding is on the second floor and the stucco is on the first floor. So having that masonry block, and you showed us some options, thank you for sharing that, on the bottom, and having some kind of wood siding, I think is appropriate for the area. I think it would really harmonize all those craftsman style houses that you've been talking about, rightly so. So I guess my question to the developers is the only reason that you decided to go with the engineered wood because of the durability, or did you consider the wood siding? And if you did, what made you decide not to use it?
This is Josh again with Mode 3. Before I got into architecture, I did a lot of siding and framing of houses. when I started doing this, redwood was the go-to wood for wood siding. Everybody used redwood. You can't do it anymore. Then cedar came around. Everybody used cedar. They would run it still through a machine that would paint it and seal it, and then you would put it up on houses. This was done all over the Midwest. The inherent problems with those sidings are in modern form with wood that is coming from trees today is that there's a lot of knots in them. There's a lot of moisture. It's a high maintenance item. I'm just going to be honest there. It's a high maintenance item. Natural wood just is. That's why these engineered wood products are coming out more and more, because it is a very low maintenance item. It's dimensionally stable too, which means that it doesn't cup, twist, warp, or want to pop nails in the sun, because the sun will beat on wood siding and often it can do all those things to the siding. This material does not do that. You can seal it better, and it's got a 30-year warranty. I think it's at least a 30-year warranty. I think some are even higher. So a lot of those things come into consideration. I think the other thing is that oftentimes the cedar and the redwood, when you would paint it, you don't even really get a wood grain. It just looks flat. This stuff is trying to get a wood grain integrated into the face of it, so it adds some more character to the material. So I guess to answer your question, those are the inherent problems. You know, if it's a small garage or something very small, I don't see why natural wood couldn't be used, but on a larger scale, I think this is a material that is easy to cut. It's durable, and it holds up better. In all honesty, it holds up a lot better. We've used it on a lot of projects in a lot of different climates, not just ours either, all over the country, and with very good results. I guess I'll finish up too on the stone thing. I mean, I want to push back on the brick thing, because if you look at the approved materials that the DRB allows, you know, there's the field stone that shows up right on that selection. There's the cut stone or the field stone. I can't remember what that slide looked like, but we're choosing exactly one of those items, which is an approved material. That's why we chose it. So I guess I'm hearing your perspective on the brick part, but to set this project apart and make it unique, you have to sometimes go to a material that's going to add more character. It's going to add more texture. The brick, I agree. That building is handsome, but it's got a flat roof on it too down the street. That's totally different animal than what we're doing here. So I think that with sloped roofs, which was a very integral part of this design, the stone would look better. I hope maybe you seeing more of those rectilinear shapes. Maybe we can meet in the middle on that, because some of those stone patterns were a little more like brick, but we're going after the texture and the shadow line that this material pulls off that brick just won't do. That's one of the main reasons. So I mean, maybe we can look to something in the middle of one of those other stones, because we're not excited about the brick.
So I guess, and I'm not familiar with the quality of the cedar right now. I will say that my house is 110 years old and I've never replaced the cedar. I finally have to replace actually a little bit of a dormer cedar. It's the first time that it's come free. So I know that the quality of the cedar shakes is durable for the older cedar trees. I don't know how the newer cedar trees actually have the moisture and so forth. And I did want to clarify in terms of the brick. I mean, my intention was not to replace all the stone with the brick, but was rather to have that front face of that building be brick. I think it would certainly mimic the buildings that we're taking down, and certainly take the building that is just south of that And then you can have more of the craftsman style on the Oregon and the California sides. I just think that, I think it would break up those buildings a bit, because as Eric said, that's, you know, it's almost 2/3, it is greater than 2/3. I think it's 70% of that block. And so we're tearing down a whole bunch of houses and replacing it with one big item. I appreciate that you have some of them separate a little bit closer to the Busey side. But I think it'd add more character if we did that. In terms of the, I mean, it sounds to me like that's just not something in terms of the replacing the engineered wood to the actual wood planks is something that you would consider. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I feel like going to real wood would be a mistake. I feel like, I mean, what are we after with, I guess I'm going to ask why does real wood, is it something in your mind that says that if it's 100-year-old wood, it's going to survive forever? I guess there's a resistance to this. I mean, or do you think it just looks like vinyl? I mean, I guess
so,
I'm confused.
You know, I'll be honest with you. I actually have to have my roof replaced, and part of my roof being replaced is some wood that is deteriorated. And my roofer came and showed me exactly what you're planning on putting up there. I have a 3-story house, and I looked at that. I looked up there, and I said, yeah, that looks like vinyl. That does not look like wood. And I said, we're going to replace it with regular wood. So my answer to you is that I just don't think that it approximates the look of regular wood. It's just not there yet. So that's why I've been kind of pushing on having more of a wood-like structure on the exterior, especially on Oregon and on California.
Eric, did you have your hand up?
Is there another product that maybe is higher quality that looks more like wood than the one that was on display?
No, this is Jacob. I'm not sure if that's going to make it anything that's going to be in that vein of engineered wood is going to be pretty similar. LP SmartSide is pretty is used pretty on a widespread basis. It's one of the industry leaders in that type of siding product.
Dennis.
So I really appreciate what I hear is that the developers are really thinking about the comments that we're making, and I appreciate the fact that, you know, that they're at least taking the honest time to ponder our comments. I was wondering if another closer example to the city building would be the development that's still under construction at 200 South Vine, whether we know if SmartSide siding is used in that development, because I'm very familiar with you know, the impression that it makes to the community and to the passerby as far as whether it looks like real wood or if it's, you know how today modern stair railings into your house are being replaced by plastic, and wood fences are being replaced by molded plastic fencing units. And you know, when you see them and they're painted pre-white, and you know right away that's not wood and that's not a real material, that's plastic. And then you see that a year later that fence is like falling apart. These are the kind of concerns of quality that that is kind of being addressed by the questions that the city council is having, and is, I think, were brought up in the design review board too. Material quality has, you know, it's just like when you can walk into a new house and you know that the floors are plastic, even though they're pretending to be paneled plank wood floors. They just don't look at, there's just nothing that looks the same. Now, on the exterior of a building, sustainability and durability are maybe even more acceptably decision factors than perhaps your personal living room floor, which you probably would rather have it being natural oak rather than the vinyl planking that you can get at Home Depot. So so I mean, I appreciate this conversation. I don't know where it's going to end. I think I'm sort of more interested really in finding out about options for the stone cut lower first floor, ground floor treatment. So if you're not seriously thinking about brick as being an option for those, really when you look at the facade in the front, we're really only talking about the facade being clad on the first floor level. The upper stories are going to be, over this wood product apparently. So, I mean, one way of adding, one of the aspects about the design is that each individual unit is got a rather kind of busy architectural features going for it. You've got 3 different colors on 3 different floors, and you've got also divisions among those. So you get the kind of a confused harmony, and yet on the other hand, you get kind of a massive front along Lincoln because the building is visually one solid block. It may have passages dividing into thirds, but the passages are disguised by the fact that they're roofed. Even though there's not a door, the roofing of those passages presents what looks to be like a solid unit, but it's the repetition becomes common on that facade. So I guess I'm kind of interested in knowing about choices in the brick lower floor, ground floor surfaces. I saw some in your designs that are being offered by manufacturers that perhaps would interest me more than the rough cut surface that you've chosen for the ground floor. And if you would be interested in some of the other brick, and they're still going to be, I guess they're still going to be gray, but they're going to be, the shapes are going to be somewhat irregular, but they're still going to be rectangular generally. I would be interested in knowing about, are those options that the community would prefer? But the only way that we're going to find out about feedback on that is to postpone our decision tonight and come back to it to allow the community to weigh in on that and perhaps evaluate it, because it's going to be really hard to evaluate it and make a decision tonight when we don't really, I haven't even seen the proposed brick that is sitting in the community development office because I couldn't access it. And I haven't seen what it might look like with these other options, which one of them actually rather appealed to me. So, so I'm not helping you any, but I'm just offering the fact that I appreciate your willingness to kind of debate what might happen here with us. And perhaps if we had just a little more time, we could maybe make a decision that would come closer to the goals of maybe myself and some of the members of the community.
Jared Miller.
I just wanted to know if architects could give us a little bit of feedback on go, no-go, and your opinions on, if the 2 north-south buildings apart from the one large building, or possibly even the north-south sides of that larger building, or the, I do agree with Eric that it does kind of all take the same design all the way around the building. Even though it's broken up physically, it still makes it look like one structure. Is there feasibility in the scope of the project to think about different designs in different parts of the buildings other than what's being presented?
I'll speak first, and Josh, I'll probably let you jump in too. I guess part of, I'm going to share my screen again too, because I want to go back to some of the things that were discussed. Another thing for us to keep in mind is that there's several things that we're giving back on this development. One of them, and we're kind of concentrating on the exterior materials, which I do understand there is a need to keep those within a certain range. You can't just do anything. But in terms of the aesthetic, I guess is what I'm thinking is, if that's one aspect, and that's a difficult one because the ownership has an idea of what they want this to look like, and having this continue across all of the buildings was intentional because this is a consistent development. They kind of want this to feel like it's all part of the same thing. And I also brought this up to show that one of the other things that we're doing is preserving trees. That was an aspect of this design. And there will be several trees in front of these buildings. So a lot of these facades are actually going to be obscured by trees. We do feel like it's important, and we were directed by the DRB to do better on preserving trees. So I guess let's keep that in mind. And back onto the discussion of the building mass, I know that we looked at the 809 West Nevada project. That project, I know for a fact, does not actually even separate the buildings. All it does is provide like an indentation in the facade to sort of break it up. These actually do physically have a more pronounced separation extending up through the building. So I know that not every comparison is perfect, but there are some things that I think are improved upon in this project over that one in terms of complying with what the guidelines require. But I guess back to the question on whether or not it's a go, no go for going with the brick materials. I think it's going to be difficult to make something that looks right. We don't want to just put brick on one facade, and I feel like right now this is going to be one more material too many. It's just going to introduce more complexity and other texture in here that isn't needed. The ownership has looked at this with us for a while, and they are pleased with it. And I do remember there were some, and maybe not everybody liked the look of this, but I do remember some positive feedback from some of the other public hearings about the look of this. So I think it goes both ways. So I guess I would say, based on the ownership's timeline, they're very pleased with this, and I think to change and go backwards in terms of the design and revisit some other things is not really something that they're willing to do at this point.
Bill Brown, you've been trying to get in here for a while. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not an architect, so I don't have any comments on the aesthetics, but I did have a question about the permeable pavers and some of the sustainability stuff. Some of our public input seems to mention that what's being proposed now is not really permeable interlocking pavers, or it's something less than what they were expecting. Can somebody explain if the permeable pavers that we see on the diagrams, if they're truly permeable pavers where water will go through, or are they mounted on concrete, or how's that work?
Yeah, sure. Let me share my screen again. Yes, that was something that we went back and revisited, and we do agree with that approach to make that change to use an actual paver system. We had discussed just in general doing permeable paving, but we had a discussion during DRB about what the form that would take, and the consensus was that it would be much better to do a paver system, and we agree with that. So it is our intent, and we have called out that on the new drawings to make it clear that that's what we're talking about, is using an actual paver system. That it's actually like a brick module, and the joints are open to allow water through. We have here's a cross section to show that it has a gravel or some kind of a granular base that needs to go down first. So it's quite a substantial system, and able to do a lot better in terms of controlling the keeping the runoff from becoming a problem. And this would work in conjunction with the requirements that we'll have to follow in getting a permit with the city engineering department in terms of the on-site detention requirements. So yes, we have made that change to go with an actual paver system, and I've got some other images to show kind of what that would look like. Here's one, but just a couple of images. I think this is.
It looks like this is pretty similar to what the MTD has in their parking lot, and it would actually allow the water to infiltrate and nourish the roots of the trees and everything. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then I was also real impressed with the amount of insulation in the building and between floors. I think if I read that right, you showed like an 18-inch space that would be filled with insulation. Is that between every floor, or is that just on the ground floor?
Yeah, that's to indicate that we do have, and I'll share my screen one more time.
2x6 construction.
We have some areas, as we discussed, that the parking is tucked underneath the buildings. So there will be occupied floors right above those parking areas. So that particular system has to do with what's happening above those areas. So when it mentions floors, it's talking about the insulation in those areas, which is kind of like, well, it's an insulated floor for the second level, is what it would be.
Okay, I see. And then with the wood siding, or the engineered wood siding, I know that they use, they can use various grades of wood, so that's a sustainability advantage. And then I think some of them also use recycled resins when they make those. I don't know if this particular company does. Do you happen to know if it's been long enough for people to figure out what the end life looks like? Are they recyclable? Can they be turned into something else when the building comes down?
That's a good question. I would probably have to reach out to somebody to ask that specifically. I do know that LP SmartSite has a pretty strong commitment to sustainability, and they've got some information on their website about the practices that they follow, and I'm not sure I know that the resins that they use are low emitting. I don't know about recyclability of those. I'd have to check on that. But again, I know that they're very committed to sustainability. In terms of the longevity, they actually mentioned that they have a field test facility. I didn't know this, but they have a field test facility in Hawaii where they have put this stuff on a building that's been in place since 1996. They put it in Hawaii in order to subject it to large amounts of moisture and insects, an insect type environment, specifically termites. So again, this is their own literature, so I haven't gone and verified that. That's what they say. But anyway, I think there's quite a commitment from them in terms of sustainability, but I would have to check a little bit more about the recyclability.
Okay. I think that's all my questions. Thanks.
Charisse?
Yeah. I guess my question falls on one of two things. I know that you'll be demolishing the duplexes, correct? Those duplexes that Mary Alice showed earlier, those will be demolished?
Correct.
Okay, so in regarding the whole brick thing, do you ever recycle bricks from the demolished buildings that you use? That you know, I was thinking that would be a good resource of bricks regarding if in fact something, you know, passes regarding that. The other thing is with the rectangular stones that of some of the stuff that was shown. Do those come in different colors? For example, maybe if it doesn't have to be a brick facade, but something closer even to what the color scheme is across the street, in the sense that instead of having the grays and the light grays and the eggshell grays, that you have something that is more in line with that particular color scheme. Maybe that is also an issue. Maybe that could be an issue or something that you think about in your design. Could you give me any information about that?
Yeah, no, that's a good point that you bring up. We can examine that. The color scheme, definitely, if we do a different style of or shape of stone, we'll have to look at some other colors maybe, but we think that the color scheme will try to be close to what we've come up with already, but we would like to keep it sort of in that vein. But I guess to your point, instead of going with the more random rubble shape, these other rectangular cut stones do start to look more like the rough cut stone that is a kind of an accent on the front element across the street at Alice Campbell. So I think that maybe there would be a chance to harmonize in that regard. And then to your point about the bricks coming down off of the building, I know that the contractor, there's a few contractors that do demolition in the area, and they do take the materials, and those materials are able to be used again on other projects. And I don't know many more details about that. That's usually included in their price to do the demolition work. Then they are able to use those materials and have them used for another purpose. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that those bricks would get reused in some fashion.
Is there any way that they could be reused in the building of this particular project? Or would there not be enough? But I'm just thinking in terms of, because this isn't my ward, but I'm thinking in terms of what it seems the neighborhood itself, the continuity that they want to try to keep in the design and as Eric put it, the harmony of that particular neighborhood. So is there any way that those particular bricks could be recycled and used in this project? Is that something that could be done? That might solve the brick problem or something thereabouts.
Yeah, no, I think that that comes back down to the look of the building aspect. I think that the ownership is not interested in preserving that specific brick for this project. Again, I think that the stone is the preferred masonry for this particular project.
So that would be a no.
Correct.
Okay, so my other question then is regarding the color scheme. Maybe not so dull a color, maybe something that is more harmonizing again with what's across the street, that might actually help bring, if you're not going to, if you're not going to consider anything else, that maybe, like I said, the neighborhood wants to consider that type of aesthetic, what's across the street within their neighborhood. Do you consider any of these things at all a possibility of changing the color scheme, including the stone facade at the bottom, if there's more of a yellow type of stone that can be used as opposed to the white or the grays? I don't know. Is that a possibility? I'm just trying to find a happy compromise somewhere.
No, I understand. It's difficult to have that kind of discussion. I think it just
without
when we talk about colors, that's a difficult one, because there could be. I know you're saying. I think you're saying is it would be a color scheme that would try to harmonize across the street. I guess it's not something that I think that I'm not sure how well that would go over, just for the same reasons that I've.
Well, all I know is that, some of the pictures that were shown of their projects where those kinds of things weren't taken in consideration, those are some butt ugly buildings. And just to be honest and blunt. So, it seems to me that as a developer and even the owner, it seems that you would want to attract people if changing the color scheme, if it's something that even, since you seem to be uncompromising about materials, maybe just changing the color scheme of the building itself will make a difference, rather than dull, drab, post-apocalyptic gray. And I'm sorry, that's what I see when I see because I see plenty of gray buildings, but that particular neighborhood seems to have a composite of different colors and different types of buildings. And I'm not saying that you have to go with the Santa Cruz gold or the terracotta orange or something like that. I'm saying that something that complements the area, that could make everybody on some level feel good about this project that's getting ready to take down a bunch of loved old houses. And it's just something to consider. I don't know if you'd be willing to consider just even thinking about something as simple as color scheme, which might be a color scheme to me that would be more attractive than it looking like people are going from the coal mines back to their dull, drab homes, because those colors don't excite me personally. They just kind of look ugh. So if you just even considered thinking of those particular color schemes that also go in some way kind of connect with what the Alice Campbell building has, and the brick building around the corner, and just trying to keep some kind of continuity in that way. Maybe that would change even how the fake wood looks on the siding, you know, with the siding or something, rather than just that postmodern gray scarce look. That's just me. I'm not a designer, but I am thinking in terms of what that particular neighborhood, what they're trying to get across to you is what they want aesthetically.
Well, yeah, I appreciate your comments. I know we do have to follow what we're trying to make something that is attractive to multiple people, and also in particular our client, and they're just, you know, they actually do like this color scheme and find it attractive, and so they're at this point they're not. I don't believe that they're interested in looking at other options on that.
So they're going to go with the Hunger Games look. Okay.
Mary Alice, can you take the chair for a second?
Yeah, I will take the chair. The chair recognizes Bill Colbert.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to weigh in as well. Give everybody else a chance. We've discussed this pretty extensively. I'm actually going to go completely against the grain from what everybody else has said, except for the designers. What one person considers trash, the other person considers treasure. I think that the U of I buildings are beautiful, but those are U of I buildings. I don't think that it's necessarily a value added to the neighborhood to replicate in some form or fashion the Alice Campbell building across the street. I think the building needs to look more like a residential building than it does an industrial building. I'm not personally a huge fan of linear red brick. You can go out in the country and look at almost every farm ranch house that's been built in the 60s and 70s, and they all look red brick. And I'm just not a huge fan. And I'm not a huge fan of the look of the red brick buildings that were built in the 20s and 30s. I'm just, just personally, my taste, I guess, are different than everybody else here on the board. I do, as opposed to what Sharice just said, I think that the building looks very attractive. I like the rough cut stone. I like the different looks. One member on the council said it all looks the same, and somebody else said, "Oh, it's too broken up." We can't have it both ways. Either it all looks the same or it's all broken up. So even within the council, we kind of have different opinions of what the building looks like. From my perspective, I believe the designers are using materials that are approved for that corridor. They're not going off the reservation, so to speak. No, they're using what materials that have been approved for them for that corridor. And I personally like the building. Several years ago, before we bought our house, we were going to build a house. And although our current house is all wood, 100% all the way around, and it's got real wood, horizontal siding, the house that we were going to build was going to be an engineered wood. And we were going to use engineered wood for the exact same reasons that the designers stated tonight. It's got a 50-year warranty. It comes in colors. It's got durability. It wouldn't cup, nail pops, the resistance from the sun, the resistance from insects. There is a lot of advantages to using an engineered wood, and an engineered wood has real wood in it. It's got the other man-made materials in there as well, but I think from a street perspective, I think that engineered wood in today's quality replicates wood, real wood siding as best that it can. So I don't want the developers who are on the call to be completely disheartened because not all 7 members of the council have the same opinion. I like the building, and I think you guys did an awesome job, putting something together that does harmonize with the neighborhood. Yeah, it's not red brick, but I think it looks good. So those are just my opinions, and the fact that they appeared to follow the rules. So.
Would you like the chair back, Bill?
Yes, I would.
All right, the chair is yours.
Bill Brown.
Yeah, it sounds like we're done with questions and getting ready for discussion. So I'll make a motion to send ordinance number 2020-12-070 and 2020-12-071 to City Council with recommendation for approval.
Do I have a second? Second?
I'll second it for the sake of discussion.
Okay, Jared seconds it. So is there any more discussion now that we're done with questions, I suppose? Dennis Roberts.
I think that, okay, there's so many aspects about the project I think are positive. A lot of the sustainability issues that are in the project are good. I really appreciate the fact that they're retaining the trees along Lincoln Avenue. I think that's very important. I like the idea that the sidewalk has been moved back a little bit closer to the building to accommodate that. I think it's very thoughtful of them. I like the idea that they're willing to add interlocking permanent permeable pavers to the interior in some of the parking areas to allow drainage to protect the trees and retaining some more trees by eliminating a few parking spaces, which I think is appropriate. So there's just so many aspects about this, the prepping for electric charging for vehicles, for having solar panels on the rooftops. All these things are very positive to me. The whole project is maybe slightly oversized what I would like to see at this corner, but I could live with that perhaps. I think that maybe the one thing that could be done that I think would actually make the materials being used harmonize somewhat better to maybe what one would see in construction within the community itself would be to consider changing out the rough-hewn brick to a more slightly rough but more regulated rectangular modular brick, which actually was shown perhaps in the last gray slide that the developer Jacob had shown to us, that maybe they're not all identical like brick, but that they're more or less similar in shape and they're slightly staggered. I think that look could actually sort of say to me residential rather than office, or maybe what I would call student housing approach to brick. I think it would look more residential, and I think there would be slight moderation in maybe the coloring of those bricks, even though generally they would be of a uniform tone. I think that would I think improve the frontal look of the facades probably extremely well. And I think that would be the one thing that I would suggest that developers consider seriously. Maybe I'd like to see then, if this goes to the city council, generally I think I really am ready to approve this in general, but I would like to see what it would look like and maybe samples of this other choice to be made available to us so we could look at it this week, or maybe bring in photographs so we could see it. If we can't see it physically, we could see it virtually through the next Zoom conference that we have about this. So I'm mostly pleased with what I see. And I appreciate all the effort that the developer is doing to try to accommodate the needs of the community and the design review board. But maybe we just need to go like one step farther, and we'll have something that brings the harmony that we're looking for more together in a sense of residential construction. So to me, it doesn't have to be orange or yellow brick. like across the street. It doesn't even have to be red brick, but maybe there's a tone of sandstone that just would work in a really nice way with the project and ought to be considered perhaps. Thanks.
Mary Alice?
So I'm going to move on from the exterior because I think we've had a big discussion about the exterior. I do want to thank the developers for basically moving back the building a little bit and saving those 5 trees along Lincoln Avenue. I did have a question about the trees that were chosen. So there's 5 trees that are being taken down because the building is going to cover them, so you can't save those. And the trees, I think there's 7, I counted 7 trees that are being planted to compensate for some of that. Some of the trees are not necessarily canopy trees. And I'm wondering, so I'm looking at the 2 trees interior to where the parking lot is. I looked it up. I'm not an arborist, but according to some websites, they're considered loose canopy trees. And then there are some ornamental trees on the north side on California. So did you choose them? I know that you talked to the city arborist about the specific varieties of trees that would be appropriate. Was it the city arborist who chose it, or was it you and the developer who chose those?
Yeah, this is Josh. I can answer that. That selection came from the arborist. We sent him
those specific. Okay.
Yeah, and we're open to whatever. If that's not what you think it should be, or if there's a difference of opinion there, then I think we need to bring it up with the arborist. But those are his suggestions for those particular spots.
My second question is that there's been some conversation about the pavers in terms of interlocking pavers, and do you consider your system an interlocking paver system? I don't know all the engineering details of those paver systems.
Yes, it's interlocking. And that way, when a car is on the pavement, rotating wheels back and forth when you're turning, then the pavers don't come loose. Because when they're in parking spaces, you're going to have wheel turning when you're trying to back in and out of spaces. So they need to be stable. So when they're set, there's multiple layers of rock that go below them. And then in between the joints, they brush in or broom in and vibrate in using a vibrating machine, a stone that goes in between the joints. And it's all done in a very specific way to allow the water to infiltrate down through the joints. That's the whole idea. But it is stable enough so that it will hold up to wheel turning is the idea for the systems. That's why they're advertised as their own systems. You can't just go and just put bricks down and like you would on your patio.
Sure.
It won't work. This is a pretty specialized thing.
So, one of the things that the DRB talked about was increasing the amount of permeable space. So right now, what is hashed on the design are just the actual parking spots that are that don't have an overhang. Did you consider increasing the permeable pavement in terms of the driveway and the areas that go into the parking spots?
Well, there's another part of this site that is in complete disguise that you can't see from space. The neighboring Europa property to the east has a big parking garage underneath, and there's a huge retaining wall along the east side. During our construction documents phase and our engineering phases, when we do this project, we're going to have to understand, based on soil borings of the property, if there's water laden soil down against that retaining wall along that east side, we don't want to create a problem. There may be a problem there already that we don't know about. So I can't say that we can increase it at this time right now. We did increase some areas around where we added the trees. We did eliminate 5 parking spaces. I think Kevin brought that up. Right. We eliminated 5 spaces, so we did add actually some more tree island in the middle. So we added more pervious area there. And then we saved 3 more trees that we were gonna, by the bike parking, more centrally located there. And we put another island around a large tree that was in the middle that had two spots that were very close on either side of it. So, I mean, to answer your question, we did increase the pervious a little bit. But before we would consider doing any more of this interlocking, we've got to get soil borings on this site. Our construction documents at that time, we would look at doing other areas.
So would you be amenable if the, they call them soil borings, allowed it to increase the pervious amount of area there?
Yeah, we can look at extending from maybe the middle parking bay to the east around that tree for that section. The other thing we got to remember too is underneath this, we've got to do some per city requirements. We have to do some detention for this because we have roofs. We have to detain it somehow. We can't dump the water from the roofs all onto grade. We've got to somehow collect it. And we're meeting city standards there in terms of stormwater collection. So we have to be careful with that too. But you know, do I sit here and say right now, would we do the interlocking paver thing for the whole thing? My answer right now would be no. We would do what we've shown right now. And if we can get the borings back favorably to do a little more between maybe say that central parking area and that large tree and parking area to the east, that would be one spot. But we're also going to have to consider where we're going to put our underground detention. We're going to have some regardless on this site. And that's a civil engineering thing that we're going to have to get into when we get down the road a little further, when we design this
Gotcha.
in its final form.
Gotcha. And then I had a question for city staff in terms of this preliminary and final proposal. In terms of the energy efficiency treatments identified in ordinance attachment B, I don't see an attachment B.
I think I forgot to include attachment B. Let's see if that was one of the exhibits though.
It maybe there is an exhibit all the way at the end that kind of addresses that. I don't know if that's what you meant by attachment B. It's let me find it.
Yeah, I think exhibit N is,
Yep. Exhibit N.
I meant to, yeah, that should have been included as ordinance attachment B. Apologize for that.
Okay. All right, those are my questions.
Charisse?
Yeah, I just want to say back to you, Bill Colbrook, regarding I think there are a lot of good things. It's not that I think that there aren't any positive things regarding this PUD. I guess I'm thinking in terms of how the neighborhood itself also will be affected on some level. And that's why I came up with the possible compromise of a change in the color scheme of the building itself. I feel that, you know, there's some things that can be taken in consideration, even if you're not going to have a brick facade, but they want something that mirrors on some level, at least, what their neighborhood, how, you know, it's not just a gateway, it's a gateway into this neighborhood as well. So that was all I wanted to say, and that's why I was hoping that there might be some leeway on the color scheme of the building, and that might actually be a nice compromise on some level, and that it might actually, if they're going to use the engineered wood, if that's since that seems to have been not necessarily approved by the designing board, but you know, it's being left up to us, that it may actually add more of that natural wood look that in a different color rather than what I've seen in the other colors. So, you know, the examples of the other colors, because it does look fake. Maybe in a different color, it doesn't look as manufactured.
Well, diversity of opinion is wonderful, and I appreciate yours and everybody else on the council as well. So, Eric, you had your hand up as well.
Yes, one question for the developers and one for staff. For the developers, what is the difference in permeable area currently relative to the permeable area in your current design? And for staff, one of the emails we got from one of the local residents said that there was insufficient capacity in the sewer and storm drainage system in that area, and they were concerned about whether this building would put too much pressure on those. And they mentioned sewer backups becoming more common. So that's a question for staff. Thank you.
Sure, I'll jump in first and answer that staff question. So we take, as with pretty much all proposed developments, we take this to our development review team and run it by our civil engineers in Public Works, and they had no concerns about this overloading the system in some way. Tim Cowan is on the call, so if he wants to jump in, he can add anything to that as well.
Yeah, this is Tim. Just in regards to that, all the development and stuff, whenever they go through the formal design process, they're going to be subject to complying with our city ordinances that have stipulations on exactly what the designers were talking about of, you know, they're going to have to provide adequate detention so that they're not, you know, providing undue issues to the downstream drainage system. So that'll all be reviewed and will have to be compliant with city codes.
Bill Brand, you have your hand up, and then after Bill, I would encourage maybe a vote because we've got a couple more items on the agenda that we still need to get to before midnight. So, Bill.
There was my question about the relative areas.
Oh, yeah, this is Josh again. It's 7,400 square feet more impervious than what was there existing.
What percentage would you say?
Yeah, I'm looking that up. A lot of that is the parking that contributes to that. The current site is underparked. They wouldn't even come close to meeting what would be required. I can't remember what that was. It was. I'm trying to look it up here.
I think it's 24%.
Yeah, 24%. 24% increase. Yeah. I was gonna jump in just to summarize our side. I know we're getting late, but I wanted to show one last thing if I could. I know we're talking a lot about colors and bricks and textures and everything, but I feel like I want to have Jacob share the screen, and I just want to show what we're doing here. Using the PUD process, you know, we're going through this. We've had Plan Commission, we've had DRB, and I just want to show you what we're doing above and beyond what would be required by code. You know, codes are meant for a minimum, but the codes these days are actually very good, especially the energy efficiency. You know, we're asking for an increase in floor area. We need to remember, I just want the council as a whole to remember it's not just about what you're seeing and what we're showing in these images. We're also looking at other factors here that need to be considered. And going into this, we could have just done one building like I've explained before. We didn't. We did 5 separate buildings. We went into this trying to preserve trees. We're preserving 23 of 28 trees. And we're providing 7 new ones to replace the 5 that are being removed. I want to also point out that per discussions after DRB, we've reached out to the University of Illinois to take the wood from the trees that we're going to have to take down and do something with them. You know, there's actually things that you can do to donate the wood. We're gonna do that. I just want to show the comparison of what we're asking and then the items that we're going to provide. And I think that, in all fairness, I think we've done a pretty good job here of trying to offset our ask of an increase in floor area. And I want to remind everyone that floor area ratio is not some hard and fast number. It's increased on this project specifically because we broke this up into multiple buildings. We had more staircases to get people up and down to the units. And by doing that, it put us over. So our ask is, in my opinion, minimal, and we're giving a lot with this. I think the other thing that I want to just display one more time is, you know, what you see from across the street. And if Jacob, if you find those images, you know, if you're standing on the University of Illinois side and you look across the street, this is what you're going to see. Folks, these buildings may be old, but they're in bad shape. We have fire escapes that connect apartments inside these buildings, and they are not safe. The other thing that has been hidden from all these conversations that we've had for 3 months, from DRB to Plan Commission, the first city council meeting, nobody brings this up. I'm going to bring it up. Not one of these structures is code compliant up to modern living standards in any way, shape, or form. They've been retrofitted again and again and again. The brick on some of these buildings, that brick on those 2 duplexes, it's an inferior brick. It was cheap back then, it's cheap now. And we even debate that some of these structures may have even been re-bricked. It's hard to tell, but it's possible. The foundations on these structures have major problems. Steps don't comply. We have garages that are falling apart. We can go on and say how amazing it would be to fix all this stuff up. You know, I dream too. Yeah, it'd be great. But the reality is it's inferior construction, a lot of it to begin with. And this is the image right there that you see from across the street from our University of Illinois. Do we want to keep this? My opinion is no. My opinion is that this corridor per the zoning is meant to have a slightly higher density for the comprehensive plan. We've talked about all that. We're going to clean up power poles that are in the way right now. I just want to emphasize that a lot of what you're seeing here, that's not even wood siding, it's vinyl already on the buildings. The stone that's on that house right there was done by somebody by themselves, probably over the weekend, 40 years ago. I argue that it's even original. So I think we need to really, really have a conversation. Well, we don't need to have a conversation. It is what it is, people. It was, in its heyday, the thing. Yes, I agree, these were all single family homes, but they've been chopped up. They're not anymore. We have drainage problems between these buildings that you wouldn't believe. There's water all over the place. I think that I want your consideration for this from our side. We have done a job to come in here and meet our clients' needs. They need 70 units. We're creating studio and one-bedroom units that meet modern living standards, energy efficiency. None of these structures that you see here have any of that. The other thing that we provide is our ground floor units by law have to be Fair Housing Act adapted, which means anybody in a wheelchair or other impairment can use the ground floor apartments, and we can adapt the apartments to meet their needs. That's a law. None of these structures would be able to have that without ramps and elevation changes and lifts and other things that, I'm sorry, they're cost prohibitive. We'd never be able to pull it off. So I guess that's my summary. I just want you to understand that there's more than just the look of this building. There's more than just the look of the brick, and we can talk and talk and talk, but there's more that we're providing here that this current site does not provide. I am all for a character for a neighborhood. If we tried to attempt this one block to the east, forget it. We wouldn't even try. But this is along the Lincoln corridor. I'll say it again. It's meant to be a little higher density here, as we've all discussed during Plan Commission. And I want your consideration. This was not a development team that went in here and tried to throw up 5 stories in one single building with elevators and 2 stairs and blew away all the trees. We went in this surgically, very specifically, in a manner to try to save trees, to try to really work with this fabric that exists. And I think that's all I'll say. Thank you.
Thank you. Are we ready for a vote? Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Yeah. Okay, Ms. Wu,
No.
Mr. Sachs,
No.
Ms. Hersey, Ms. Hersey,
You're muted.
No.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts, Mr. Roberts,
Right. I think I'll say yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
No.
Okay, with that, the motion does not pass. Next up on the agenda is ordinance number 2020-12-071.
No,
And
I
an
think
ordinance
Sharice had a
approving.
question.
I'm sorry? Sharice?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, is it, will we be holding this over for another COW meeting or what? This particular item again?
Ms. Clark?
Yes. You have a question?
Yeah, what's the
Yeah.
guidance?
Will we be holding this over for another COW meeting, Ms. Clark?
Well, you guys actually didn't make the motion to hold it over that way. You can make that motion if you want, but as it is right now, it appears that it just failed.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we possibly carry this particular item over to another meeting for discussion, pending, because the architects said something about looking into other materials or whatever that would be more amenable, possibly to the community. So maybe we need to have an opportunity for that to happen, so that we can actually the neighborhood people can have some input, have an opportunity to have some input. I'd like to make a motion to
I'll
hold it
second
over.
that motion.
Okay, Sharice made the motion. Mary Alice seconded to hold it back to the committee of the whole or to the design review board.
Committee of the whole.
Committee of the whole.
Okay. Any discussion about that?
Yeah, I have one quick thing.
Go ahead.
I'll try and be brief because I know that we're running out of time. So one thing about the DRB and the reason that I'm not suggesting we send it back to the DRB is I was kind of shocked when the DRB had a conversation about appropriate materials and kind of leaving it up to city council. So rather than them making a decision in terms of whether or not those materials were appropriate, they said, here's the materials that are appropriate. And so I feel like if we send it back to DRB, that we're not going to get what we need there because they appeared to not want to make a decision on that. So that's why I think it's more appropriate to have it in a committee of the whole. So I just wanted to make that comment.
And I believe the motion was to keep it in the committee of the whole. So I appreciate that.
Before you go any further though, the other item 071, which is right under that, if you hold that one, you need to include this one as well. When the motion was made, you made it for both when Dennis made the motion and Jared seconded, it was for both of those. So are you sending both of them to the committee of the whole?
Oh, I didn't know that we'd considered 071 yet, but if we had, it's
Yes.
Yeah, it was in the motion.
Yes, I'll amend it to include both.
I'll agree.
Okay, thank you.
Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Sachs,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes to send it back to the committee of the whole for further consideration and input from the design team. Next up is ordinance number, yes, Mayor.
Could I ask for some guidance from the council on what you would like to see coming back from the developers at the committee of the whole?
I've got some, if I could be recognized.
Yes, go ahead, Dennis.
All right, so I'd like to see alternatives to the brick, or the rough stone cut at the bottom, the baseline of first floor. I'd like to, and I'd like to actually see the materials if they would be available, either in some manner, so that I could evaluate the appearance, and also then it would give an opportunity for the community to. Well, we're not going to be meeting again for 2 weeks, so it'll give the opportunity to the community to see these materials as well and chime in on how they respond to them.
Okay.
Eric?
I'd like to see the developers reach out to the community and get some feedback and show us how they've integrated the feedback that they receive from the community. I think that's been missing from the very beginning. I think the developers have missed an opportunity, and I think this is an opportunity for them to get this right.
Mary Alice?
I don't know if this is something that needs to be discussed at committee of the whole, but there are 2 items that I would like to see in a future proposal. One, that they increase the permeable pavement given the requirements by the city for the detention, and also I think they called it the bore, to make sure that they're not flooding the property to the east. I would just basically like a commitment that they would increase the impermeable pavement given those 2 items, if those 2 items can be met. The other thing, as I said, it's just something I'd like to see with the 2 ornamental trees, potentially actual canopy trees or shade trees instead of ornamental trees on the north side.
Any more suggestions? No? Okay, we've got 3 more items on the agenda. 1 ordinance and a discussion and the council input. We're coming up against 10:30 in 7 minutes. Can I have a motion for an extension now before we get involved in the human rights ordinance?
There's some people that have their hands up still, Bill. Jacob had his hand up and Will Thompson has.
I don't.
You don't see it?
No.
It's raised, the little hand in the corner of the square. If you see mode 3, Jacob Uni. I can't say his name.
It's
the architect.
Yeah, yeah, Jacob. Okay.
Yeah, I had my hand raised because I gotten notified by the developer that they do not wish to continue to another meeting. So I just wanted to make sure I relayed that to you guys.
Appreciate that. Bill Brown.
I'd just point out that if somebody wants to make a motion on the winning side to reconsider, you can still do that. Otherwise, I think it's pretty predictable when you start trying to change the color and tell people to do things that aren't in the ordinance because you want to match what's across the street, not what's up the block. That's what's going to happen. But if somebody on the winning side wanted to make a motion to reconsider, we can try to vote again.
We'll give this a little time.
I just want a clarification, Bill. Are you making a motion?
Mary, I was having a hard time hearing you.
Sorry, I just wanted a clarification. Are you making a motion, Bill?
I can't. The people that can make the motion are the people that were on the winning side. If one of the 4 people that voted no wanted to reconsider and change their vote, we could vote again. But if one of the 4 people don't make a motion to reconsider, then it just dies.
Not my ward.
I guess I would be interested to hear if the aesthetics, if there are enough problems in this that it's worth killing from our no voters and not pushing forward, even with all the things that they've offered to do on this. I feel like there were strong arguments made on the no side, which is why I voted no in order to keep it. But I mean, it's a hair's thread for me. I can see all the points both ways. It's hard to say. I think I was going with the people closest in the ward's opinion.
Before we get there, can I have a motion to extend the meeting? We're now at 10:27.
I'll move to extend the meeting to 11 p.m.
I'll second.
Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Sachs,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. We're extended to 11 o'clock, Mayor, and then I'll go back to Jared because I interrupted him. Mayor?
It sounds like at least some of the no votes centered on one was looking for an alternative to the stone shape going from the rocks to more of a rectangular shape. It focused on swapping out a couple of the tree species, a consideration of more permeable pavers, and then looking for feedback from the community. But at least several of these no votes, it sounded like these were completely topics that could be worked out between now and a council meeting next week. And if you sent it to council with no recommendation, with the request that over the next week these specific items be addressed, I think at least most of your concerns could be.
Yeah, I guess we'd still have a chance to kill it again next week. So I'd change my vote in consideration to see what could come back in the week.
Can I have a motion then?
I'll make a motion that I'm gonna find ordinance number 2020-12-070, an ordinance approving a preliminary development plan for planned unit development at 602 South Lincoln Avenue be sent forward to the full council with no recommendation pending some information we're going to get.
Does that include also 071, the companion?
That would include ordinance number 2020-12-071 as well.
Can I have a second?
Can I do that?
Yes, you can. Are you the second?
I'd like to. I think that's an appropriate approach. It gives us time to think and get feedback and possibly see something else. So yes, I make the motion.
Motion by Jared, seconded by Dennis. Sharice?
Question? Can we, okay, my question is sending it back to with no recommendation right now, what is the opinion of the developers? No hands raised from the Josh or Mode 3 Jacob?
We're trying to find out if they have a response to that.
Okay.
So right now it's the motion with the second is to the city council with no recommendation, but at least it gives us a little bit of time to iron out some of these issues. Jacob, you get your raise?
Yeah, the developer says that they're willing to do that next week. Is that what we're discussing? To move it back to next week?
Yes.
Okay. They say okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Clerk, can we please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
No.
Mr. Sachs,
No.
Ms. Hersey,
I'm going to vote yes because I want to see if they're willing, if there's some middle ground that can be met.
okay. Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes, I think it's appropriate.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
With that, 5-2, that motion passes. We're going to forward that to the city council with no recommendation from the committee of the whole, but the developer will seek to address some of the issues of the council and the community. Next up,
we'll make sure you can get access to see those samples too.
Okay.
Maybe they can be left in the clerk's office or something where, I mean, we can usually, because I never know who's in the community development offices. So
we'll make arrangements.
Yeah, and I sent out info on how to get access to those. But Dennis, yeah, on Mondays we're not very well equipped to show those. So the recommendation was to go to Tuesday through Friday and to call in advance. I can resend out the info on how to do that though.
Okay. Any other comments before we go on to the next agenda item? Okay. Next agenda item is ordinance number 2021-01-003, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code Chapter 12, Human Rights Ordinance, applicability to the city of Urbana. Is there a presentation on this?
I'll just walk through real quickly. I consolidated all the feedback that that the council gave at the last council meeting, and so I'll just very quickly highlight what was changed in the ordinance amendment. So in section 12-1, there was a desire to have some specific language about maintaining confidentiality. This is more generic. I had originally put in, offered some language about quoting another section, which got a little confusing. So this adds to our commitment that the city shall maintain the confidentiality of the complainant and any complaint brought against the city under this ordinance, unless otherwise waived implicitly or explicitly by the complainant. We also added in section 2, which is the 12-22G, which is the manner in which someone would bring an issue with a city practice to the HRC, that the commission would also maintain confidentiality. That's in the second sentence of that complainant. The definitions section is unchanged. Section 4 is really a companion piece to section 5. If you recall, Pete Resnick had mentioned that we needed to to remove the words place of public accommodation. And there was another section in addition to the one that he had cited. And so in section 4, it's making reference to changing section 12-61A. And Dennis very kindly pointed out that I had a typo in there as well. So where it says intellectual like, it should say intellectual life. And finally, in section 6 of the ordinance, the exception language that's added in 12-105E has been simplified according to, again, Pete's recommendation that we just say the provisions of Division 3 of this article shall not apply to the city of Urbana. So that's everything in one place. Happy to answer any questions.
Jared Miller.
So I think the crux of the only thing that I can see remaining that I want to hash out, and this might be council discussion, but I figured I'd get your perspective anyway, Carol, is with 1222G. Obviously, this is kind of our substitute language for removing divisions 3 and 4 and how the city goes through the processes that are outlined in those. I think we don't need to do a whole lot to this, but I think it would be good to insert something more substantive than what's in here in the manner of, you know, saying like, because there's just not anything delineated that says or really describes what this process is going to be. It just says, you know, the commission shall receive reports and, you know, review such reports and then work with mayor, council, blah, blah, blah. That's about as detailed as it really gets. And then, right, you know, that the commission shall notify the public of the outcome. Is there any reason why we couldn't put language in here that would just make that process more defined and probably more, I don't know if it's inherently, you know, in the language, it's just, you know, it doesn't say anything. It says shall review such reports and work with the mayor. But I'd like, maybe we could insert the word publicly in between shall and review. For example, shall publicly review such reports, you know, like his regular business of the HRC meetings, so that it's part of an already established public process. It doesn't need to be a special thing, but it's a part of a public hearing because it's not really illuminated in there how that would function. You see what I'm getting at? So I think something like that, I think I would like to see put in there, and you know, maybe I don't know. That was my first thought about delineating how that could happen a little bit more, because it's kind of vague right now what exactly would happen.
So you're looking for maybe something, so at the end of the process, where it says the commission shall notify the public of the outcome, it sounds like you're wanting something up front too, to say that we've received this report or whatever, and now we're going to be facilitating a result, and then we'll report on that, but that you want that called out maybe up front.
Yeah, something like that I think would be okay. Good. And maybe it'll just be for council discussion about the shall notify the public of the outcome. It's also pretty vague as far as, like, you know, how they would do that. So I'd like to see if anybody has ideas. I mean, I have an idea about what it could work, but I think we should discuss that. But if you're open to that, that would be my first question just for you, if you think we can put that as part of HRC process, you know, just in their public hearings by just inserting that word shall publicly review or amend such language to say so.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
Okay.
Mary Alice.
Jared, based on that, would it be amenable to you that right now it says the commission shall notify the public of the outcome?
Should it be the commission shall provide a memo describing the outcome to city council and the public? Would that satisfy that need? Either a report or a memo of some kind, just describing what happened and what the resolution was?
Yeah, I would just hesitate to go into it until we have a motion and
Sorry.
because that's like council discussion.
Okay, all right.
Okay, we have a motion then.
I guess I'll go ahead and make a motion so we get into council discussion if nobody else has questions for staff. All right, not hearing any, so I'll go ahead and move ordinance number 2021-01-003, an ordinance amending Urbana City Code, Chapter 12, HRO ordinance, applicability to the city of Urbana be sent forward to the full council with recommendation for approval. And I'm making this motion under the presumption we're going to offer an amendment after this.
Second that.
Okay, Jared made the motion and Dennis Roberts seconded. Discussion. Jared.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of what I was thinking. You know, I think maybe the memo is like the right idea, but how do we normally present memos on something that's non-actionable? Presentation is what I'm thinking.
Report.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe.
Committee report. How about
report
for committees? Sorry.
But I was thinking more like a presentation, you know, that if the HRO, if one of these things comes up and whether or not they agree with the, you know, complaints and the city says, okay, well, here's what we're going to do in result of this. Or if, you know, we're in a situation where the HRO, like we currently were, where the HRO says, well, you shouldn't be doing this. And the city says, well, here's the reasons why we should be doing this. And there is, you know, a disagreement. Either way, I feel like a presentation is probably the right way to bring that forward, because then we can kind of have some discussion about it. What's your thoughts on that versus just like staff report?
Mayor?
I would suggest you state that the Human Rights and Equity Officer, that's the new title of that position, shall give a report to the Urbana City Council on the outcome.
Just for the sake of both sides, I would say that's fine, but probably also the chair of the HRO, so they would both make that presentation rather than just somebody representing the city.
Well, that person actually staffs the commission, but it could be a joint, you want a joint report?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Human Rights and Equity Officer and representative from the HRC shall make a report to the Urbana City Council.
Yeah,
shall report to the Urbana City Council.
Yeah, something like that. I think.
See, Sharice's head was bobbing yes, and so was Mary Alice's. Any further discussion? Mary Alice.
So first of all, Bill, I'm sorry for speaking without being called on.
Oh, you're good.
Okay. So mine is really a discussion on, you know, the purpose of this ordinance and the groups of people that we should not be discriminating against. And so I thought of an idea of, you know, the University of Illinois, when they advertise their positions, they usually say they're an equal opportunity employer, and they kind of list out certain things. And I would like to recommend to city staff to consider drafting something to that effect, that, you know, that the city of Urbana does not discriminate, and then just list out all the things that are in our human rights ordinance, so that everybody, it's very clear to people that we do not consider these items when we are interviewing people. Now, I know that there's been a lot of conversation about criminal background checks, and I would just like to say that, you know, there's a concept called ban the box. I don't know if people are familiar with that concept, but ban the box is kind of like don't ask, don't tell in the military. And I think we need to be explicit on when we use criminal background checks, but the default is that we don't use criminal background checks. So the times that we do use criminal background checks have to do with federal and state requirements.
whether or not somebody's working in the schools and has to go through a background check, whether or not somebody deals with federal money and they have to go through a background check. But the default should be at the city that we don't use criminal background check, not only in terms of whether or not we evaluate it, the qualifications, but also, you know, even providing the job. So I just wanted to make my opinion clear in terms of how I feel like the city should approach this.
Any further discussion before we call for a vote?
I think we need to offer an amendment to the language. I'm not sure if we need to
just say consider the edits that were discussed, or you want to get more specific?
Yeah, I guess we'll review them. There might be more discussion. Eric's got his hand up, but
Eric?
I thought I saw Pete have his hand up. Maybe Pete wants to say something.
Nope, not for me.
Okay. But thank you for being available, though.
I'm here to serve.
So, Jared, did you want to offer an amendment? Your original motion?
Sharice has got her hand up.
Okay, sorry, Sharice. Go ahead.
Hi. Okay. Just to kind of piggyback on what Mary Alice was saying too, is regarding the background check issue. I think there's actually a legal term for that where, and I can't, it's bona fides something, and I cannot think of what it is right now. It just slipped my mind. That might be, and that maybe we put in or say straight out when doing these advertisements and go by what the state and federal government guidelines are regarding those particular positions that may require that kind of stuff. And I don't know if that's something that we have to put out on every position, but it may be something that disclaimer or of some sorts that may be included in the advertisement of particular positions that may require that.
Carol?
Just to be fair, the issue of criminal background checks is the next topic. It's not this topic.
Okay, sorry.
All right. Well, I'll go ahead and make a motion that the ordinance be amended as suggested, loosely described, with further in specific wording to come with regard to section 12-22, subsection G, with a language in the second sentence of the commission, while maintaining the confidentiality of the claimant, shall publicly review such reports, or some such phrasing be in there to indicate that will be a public process, that the review will be public, and that the commission shall notify via combined presentation from a member of the HRC and the staff human rights, I forget what we're calling that person now.
And equity also.
Human Rights and Equity Officer.
Yes, the Human Rights and Equity Officer, present that to council, which would be in replace of notify the public of the outcome. It's a more specific example of what we would do.
One of the longest motions of all time, but I think it was needed. I do have a second.
Yeah, well, I was the one who seconded, and I agree with the amendment.
Okay, so I believe we need to vote on the amendment first, correct?
Sure.
Clerk, could you please call the roll on the amendment?
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Sachs?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Okay, the amendment passes. So are we, is there any more discussion on the original motion? Seeing none, can we, clerk, could you please call the roll on the original motion to forward this to City Council?
Yes. Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Sachs,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
So that motion passes to send this on to the full City Council with the recommendation for approval with the amendments as provided by Jared Miller. Next is the discussion of the City of Urbana use of criminal background checks. Mary Alice.
I'd like to, I'm not sure how long this conversation would go, so I'd like to entertain an idea that we move this to the next city council meeting. I don't know if, I don't know how long this is supposed to go, but we've got 10 minutes left.
We've got 10 minutes.
I think it's going to be probably more than 10 minutes. So I would go ahead and make a motion that we move the last, second to last item on the agenda, the discussion for City of Urbana use of criminal background checks to our city council meeting in a week.
I'll second.
Okay, Jared offered the motion. Mary Alice seconded. Any discussion? Ms. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Sachs,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
That motion passes to move it to the next City Council meeting. Last up before adjournment is council input and communication. We've got 9 minutes. Jared?
I'll be very, very brief. I just wanted to say in coordination with that conversation and for those of the public who are listening that I don't think that what we're doing right now is an end to the discussion of how the Human Rights Ordinance and how HRC and independent bodies work to hold the city accountable and in those roles. And I would still expect at some point the city, even if it doesn't happen during my remaining time on council, to take up that conversation and discuss that in the context of the FY22 budget. I still think that's a conversation worth having. And I don't think it, I kind of had a discussion with Mary Alice about this, that I don't think that it's something council necessarily needs to decide alone, but it should be something maybe brought forward to voters. Anyway, I just want to make that known.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything to impart to the community? Okay, seeing no hands raised, I appreciate your patience with me. With no further business, this meeting is adjourned.